The Knights Templar remain one of the most intriguing and fascinating chapters of medieval history. They came and went, in historical terms, in the blink of an eye. From their formation here in France in the early 12th century, they were only on the scene for just under 200 years. So who were they? What did they do? And why are there still rumours that circle around them of hidden treasure, weird rituals, and satanic practices?
While they were supposed to be, fighting the Crusades, some of them would engage in things that were far from Christian, much more pagan.
They worship ahead of John the Baptist. You spit and urinate on the cross and you deny Christ. It's really bizarre. It's very dark.
There are immense rumours of their dark arts and their dark practices. For a religious order that was part of the Catholic Church that defended Christendom, that's extraordinary.
The Knights Templar were warrior monks. They were the most powerful organisation in Europe.
They were corrupt, avaricious, religious people that realised that there was an awful lot of treasure hidden somewhere in Jerusalem.
The Knights Templar were on a relic quest. They're there to find treasure. By all accounts, they succeeded.
This is Gisors Castle in France, about 2 hours north of Paris. And it was here, at a tree, very much like this one, that the whole Knights Templar story is said to have begun over 900 years ago. Now, according to the legend, a group of French knights gathered here in 1118 and split a large elm tree in half before they all made solemn vows to God to help pilgrims in the Holy Land. Now, whether or not this was true, well, to be honest, no one really knows. But we do know that around 20 knights did go to Jerusalem a year later to do just that. The order's full name was the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. And it was led by Hugh de Payens, a French nobleman from the Champagne region.
Pilgrimages started in the Middle Ages, had become popular. First Crusade had taken parts of Jerusalem. But they were finding that the pilgrims were being robbed en route. So a small band of knights were formed and they were sent to the Holy Land to protect the pilgrims. When they arrived, they took up residence in what was thought to be the original Temple of Solomon.
They were like a cross between three things. First, they were the Navy SEALs, or the SAS. They were crack elite troops of their age. Second, they were masters of finance. They were like the Goldman Sachs of the period. And third, they were a unique and committed religious group, like Opus Dei, of lay people. So you bring those three together, and it's something that only the medieval world could have created.
The extraordinary thing about the Templars is that they start off as this very, very small guard that's just there to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land. But what they then become, over the years, is this incredible, almost the first kind of pan-national, globalized corporation, if you like. I mean, it's the most extraordinary powerful institution. So the big question is, how do we go from that very small band of supposedly charitable knights to this enormous, unaccountable, incredibly wealthy, globalized institution?
What we do know is that in return for protecting pilgrims, King Baldwin of Jerusalem agreed to give the Templars stables and accommodation at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which lay right above the ruins of the Temple of Solomon. This remained the headquarters of the Knights Templar for the next 70 years. And their presence and power in the region grew very fast. But was this offer of protecting pilgrims just a front for a much more secret mission? Some historians feel that it was, and that their real focus was searching the ruins of the Temple of Solomon for a great treasure or holy relic.
They were supposedly there doing securities for pilgrims. That was their credibility. And I'm sure they did. They were knights, they were fighting men. And I think they'd got two intentions. Yeah, we're supposedly doing it for free to protect all the pilgrims, but we could do with some payment. And it was hopefully lying somewhere underneath King Solomon's temple.
Why are they put up in places of very important sort of religious significance with a lot of relics that they can have access to? Why are they staying around King Solomon's mines? Why are they why are those areas so important? So were they there to kind of bring back things of note that actually didn't belong to them at all? And that's been one of the kind of core themes that's been around for a long time when you read about the Templars.
The Knights Templar knew that Jerusalem was under siege for many, many centuries. And so what I think is that they found an inventory list. The copper scrolls tells you where all the gold is hidden. But was there another list that tells you where all the relics are hidden? Ark of the Covenant is over there. Menorah is over there. They must have. It's a labyrinth of tunnels beneath where they are staying in Jerusalem. It would have taken them decades to find what they found. They must have found something that helped them do it quickly.
Tony McMahon is an author of several successful novels on Knights Templar history, as well as the creator of a widely used Templar website. He used to work as a producer at the BBC, but now concentrates on his writing. He's long been fascinated with the stories about the Templars' dark side and their connections to the occult and their bizarre rituals. So how come these fearless protectors of Christian values developed this reputation for occult practices?
Well, I mean, the Templars were always a secret society. And as time wore on, of course, there were people who left that secret society for one or other reason, and they were eventually shopped by a couple of disgruntled ex-Templars who then made the accusations that have become famous to us of idolatry, of heresy, of sodomy, of illicit practices, of occult practices. So, I mean, at the milder end, it was denouncing Christ. It was even said that the Grand Master had to denounce Christ at his induction as Grand Master. But then it gets racier and racier. So then we have accusations, for example, that there were illicit kisses, as they described it, in their initiation ceremonies for the knights, which was kissing at the base of the spine, on the navel, on the mouth. Also that they worshipped a head, and that head was sometimes a cat's head. It was sometimes the head of John the Baptist. It was sometimes a three-faced head. It's sometimes a head in the sand. Sometimes his head spoke to them. There were different variations on that. So there were a whole stream of very steamy accusations.
When you read about some of the things that they did, it was sort of very masculine, almost like a fraternity, So there's a lot of, men together, a lot of sort of pent up, testosterone. So you can imagine in those moments where they're winding down, what it turns into is probably something far from the Christian message that they were trying to spread.
Do you understand what you must do?
Yes, Master.
All praise Baphomet.
All praise Baphomet.
The rituals that we understand the Knights Templar did, especially their initiation ritual, is really bizarre. It's very dark. The initiate swears to become a slave to the order. There's rumors of homosexuality, and you spit and urinate on the cross, and you deny Christ. So either one, this is a test. The test that initiates metal, if they still want to be a Knights Templar after they've experienced all this, or it's just simply how dark they really are.
Gisors Castle in France played an important role in the Knights Templar story. Not only was it where, beside the split oak tree, that the whole order was created, it was also where the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was taken after he was arrested on Friday the 13th, 1307. And it's still standing today. What's remarkable is that the actual cell that held Jacques de Molay and the other Templar prisoners is still intact today here within Gisors Castle. And a local historian and guide, Marie, has agreed to show me around.
Come on, Jamie, follow me in the tower.
Wow. So was Jacques de Molay held in here?
Be patient. I will show you some more. It seems because of an ancient text which tells us that Jacques de Molay was in Gisors before to go in Paris.
And what was Jacques de Molay accused of?
Oh, there were a lot of charges. The principal was heresy.
Get him down.
Kneel before the true Christ and recant your sins.
Gisors Castle plays a huge part in the story of the Templars, and legend has it that all manner of black magic and debauchery took place in that castle, and there are supposedly etchings and pentagrams and witchcraft and Satanism going on in there. But the real reason that it plays a big part in their history is the fact that their Grand Master, the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was imprisoned in that castle in a dark, dank dungeon, was tortured there, and was then burnt at the stake.
An amazing room. So we know that Jacques de Molay was held here at Gisors Castle. We just don't know where.
Yes. It seems because of this ancient text. But I have to show you another room. Very interesting.
Oh, right. It goes on.
Follow me.
OK. Oh, mind your head. Wow. So is this sort of like a prison cell down here?
Yes, it's a possibility. A prisoner could have made this graffiti on the wall.
So these carvings were done by prisoners, is that right?
Yes, perhaps.
And what do they depict? What are these scenes?
It's scenes of the Christ life.
Right.
You can see the scene here, and another scene here, very rare, like the hanging of Judah.
So these are all scenes from the Bible that were carved out by prisoners who were held here, is that right?
Here, yes.
Incredibly, there are these images on the cell walls that appear to be some intentional form of storytelling. Is this Jacques de Molay trying to say, here is the truth, here's the real story, here is what we knew, I'm about to die, so I'm gonna preserve it for you here on these walls? We don't know. It's still there today, and that makes it a really fascinating element of the mystery.
Robert Howells is an author and historian who spent years researching the truths and secrets of the Knights Templar. And he believes that they did have a dark side and many secrets to keep.
The Templars as an organisation were in the Holy Land for over 200 years, so they would have come into contact with other religions, other beliefs. They were definitely in touch with the assassins and other more mystical Eastern groups, not just the Orthodox groups, but far more occult groups. So there was this idea that they've picked up those rituals, those initiations, because they would have been in contact with those people.
Rob believes that the Templars spent time with some of the occult religious groups they encountered in Jerusalem and participated in some of their darker non-Christian rituals, some of which influenced their own ceremonies.
The Knights Templar were accused of worshipping a severed head, and one of the assassin rituals was to introduce an acolyte to a person who'd been buried up to their neck. The initiate would ask the question, and the head would speak to them. And then they would be taken out of the room, and the person in the ground would be lifted out, and they would have their head severed and put on a plate. And this would then be shown to the person as they continued around their ritual to show that the head wasn't attached to the body.
When the Templars were in the East, I mean, what better place than to become acquainted with pre-Christian beliefs? And a lot of these beliefs and practices in the temples of the East would have been far more comfortable with celebrating the body, the naked body, even the sexual acts as part of their rituals. So I think when the Templars came back, who knows, that they incorporated some of these pagan beliefs, some of these pagan rituals into what they were doing.
the rituals that the Templars were engaging in actually, because of their pagan origin, predated the Christianity that they were actually fighting for. So it's perhaps not as surprising or indeed as subversive as one may think, because the things they were doing were perhaps more real to them than this newfound religion, which they were, supposed to be preaching, which was Christianity.
Now, according to their accusers, the Knights Templar used to secretly meet to perform all manner of rituals and ceremonies. Now, the implications are that, far from being a Christian organisation, they were in fact involved in the occult and black magic. They were accused of worshipping a demonic figure called Baphomet, spitting and urinating on an upturned cross, and indulging in all kinds of bizarre sexual practices. Now, there's no proof, but here at Gisors Castle is one site where they were accused of doing all that.
They were required in an initiation to spit or trample or urinate on the cross. And also, they were required to venerate a head, which took various forms, but mainly a bearded, severed head. They did it because the inner circle, not your average knight and not your average member of the order, but the inner circle were not what you might call Christians at all.
It's probably true that the Templars did have a secret ritual whereby any new knight, when he joined, was asked to deny Christ and to spit on a crucifix or an image of Christ. Now, for a religious order that was part of the Catholic Church that defended Christendom, that's extraordinary, and we don't see that anywhere else in the medieval period.
It's often said about the Templars that they have these initiation ceremonies that in themselves are incredibly anti-Christian and indeed are positively satanic. All sorts of profane, very, very diabolical practices that the Templars are meant to take part in. They did have initiation rites that were secret. And of course, once you have a secret initiation ceremony, that allows anybody with a relatively lurid imagination to just, place that on there and go, well, I think that's what's happening.
I don't think that there was any form of cult or demon worship or anything like that to do with them. They were supposedly the poor knights of Christ, and I believe that they were good Christians. But I also believe that they were probably thieves and robbers as well. And when you could say some people, when they believed in God, all they needed to do was put an L in, because really they believed in gold.
The Templars were famously said to have travelled to Jerusalem at the end of the 11th century. Officially, they were there providing protection to travelling pilgrims, but as there were less than 20 of them at the beginning, that seems to me highly unlikely. So what were they there for? Well, the most popular theory amongst some historians is that they were there looking for treasure.
Historian Ross Andrews has made a study of the Templars over the years and believes that they might well have had a secret plan.
The reason we think the Templars were actually digging into the Temple Mound was the fact that when the temples were excavated, they actually found Templar, not remains so much, but bits of broken spurs or bits of sort of shield or something like that, but that belonged to the Templars. So they were definitely in there at some point.
Talk about covert operations. The Knights Templar was said to go to Jerusalem to protect the pilgrims as they go into the Holy Land. Well, there's hundreds of pilgrims and only a handful of Knights Templar. But in return for this so-called favor, they're given a palace wing that's right on top of Solomon's temple. And this is the real reason they're there. They're on a relic quest.
They offer their services for protecting pilgrims. They go to the Patriarch and they're given the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We don't hear anything more about them actually protecting pilgrims. What we do hear a lot more about them is digging tunnels under the Al-Aqsa Mosque, looking for something, and there are hundreds of tunnels under the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which they, of course, believed was the Temple of Solomon.
According to legend, Solomon had a multitude of treasures. He had a huge amount of gold, a huge amount of various different treasures, including things like the Ark of the Covenant. The Holy Grail, whatever that is, they possibly had hold of that. And there's a whole bunch of artifacts that had a kind of religious, magical property that they were looking for.
These things, true or false, they of course believed in it in those days, and they would have been worth millions today. And if they found them, as some people believe they did, they could become very rich. Oh, and they did become very rich.
I mean, it certainly looks questionable, given that within 10 years, there's hundreds of knights. They're already spreading out across Europe. It's incredible growth, incredible wealth, very short period of time. I cannot believe that that happened from just offering a kind of glorified medieval security guard service on the road to Jerusalem.
Many historians believe that the Templars, under the authority of Pope Urban II, at the time were on a mission of extremely focused self-interest in the Holy Land. Their aim was to fill their pockets. From their arrival in Jerusalem in 1119 to their departure from the Holy Land around the time of the fall of Acre in 1291, the Templars had become a political, military, and financial superpower. They became the most famous warriors, travelers, bankers, and landowners of their day, answerable only to the Pope, with no obligation to pay dues to any king, ruler, or diocese. It's estimated that by the end of the 13th century, the Templars numbered 160,000, of whom 20,000 were knights. They were an undoubted superpower.
The Knights Templar were extremely wealthy. They created the first World Bank. Where does this money come from? I submit to you it comes from what they found in Jerusalem. They probably found the gold that was listed in the copper scrolls for a start, but they also found other relics, maybe the Ark of the Covenant, maybe the menorah, other objects from Solomon's temple. That's where I think their money came from.
They found what they were looking for, treasure. Gold, silver, which gave them the start of the whole thing. They then became rich, and they then started lending money. They also created the first checks. So there was a chap leaving England, daren't take his money with him because he would probably be robbed on the way. So they'd issue him a check, and he could actually, when he got to Jerusalem, he could then hand in his check for cash that they'd got. And of course, they charged him interest on it. If, in the meantime, he died while he was in the Crusades, his land, his property, his castle even, may well have been held in security by the Templars, and then they would have taken his land.
And of course, that just snowballs for them in a very virtuous way, to the point in which the Templars control 9,000 estates throughout Europe, which is an enormous amount of land. And of course, once you're controlling that amount of land, you have an enormous income. That's what gives the Templars wealth and influence, and it's not some secret discovery. I'm sorry to be boring.
One of the most famous Templar commanderies, or headquarters outside of Paris, was here, hidden away in a small street just off Fleet Street in central London, and the clue is in the name, Temple.
Today, a late 12th century church stands on the site of the commandery, but it still contains stone effigies of some of the knights themselves. Templar historian and author Dominic Selwood has agreed to show me around.
There aren't that many Templar sites left in the world that you can still go and really experience what it must have been like to be a Templar. But we're standing in one of them. This is the Temple Church in the heart of London. And here in 1185, the Templars opened this building to the public. And they had the Patriarch of Jerusalem come and open it for them, which is why it's round, because it's supposed to symbolize the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, which is where all Crusaders had to go when they first arrived in the Holy Land to say a prayer in the Holy Sepulchre, and then they'd discharge their pilgrimage vow. So here we still get a sense of that. And this is largely undamaged. The chancel that was built here was also built by the Templars, but this was in 1240, so a little bit later, because King Henry III wanted to be buried here. But in this round chapel, you still get a sense of what it meant to be a Templar in the medieval period. But you have to use your imagination to recreate the stables, the castle, the dormitories, the refectories, the treasury, where they kept the treasury of the King of England, all of which would have been around here in this area we now call Temple in London.
When they first started, they were the coolest organisation for young men to join. To be Templar was just the most amazing thing. So they were, all the rich young men were just queuing up to join, and of course then handing over their money. One of the rules was when you joined the Knights Templar, you had to give them all your money, all your possessions, all your property. So without really trying, they had all this wealth.
It snowballed big time. A lot of people joined in. And of course, they became international bankers, industrialists. They had their own fleets. They had their own farms. They built huge cathedrals. They became probably some of the wealthiest people in the world.
I guess the big question is, did they find any treasure in Jerusalem? And if so, what was it?
In terms of the Templars' treasure, one has to look at a real level and a symbolic level. Did they dig and find anything and bring it back and make themselves super wealthy? There's no evidence of that at all. All their wealth can be readily explained. There's lots of documentation, charters, bills of exchange. People have been through all this. We know where their wealth came from. But symbolically, did they bring something back? Yes, very definitely. They were born in the Holy Land, and they brought back that different culture into Europe. And that was a culture that was more at ease with the East, that was more at ease with Islam. There are plenty of stories of them learning Arabic, having friends amongst the Islamic leaders. So that was something new for Europe, and that is something they brought back. And to some people, that could be seen as a treasure.
But there are some who are convinced that the Templars brought back something more than just Arabic culture and knowledge. They believe that the Templars set out on a very focused mission to discover something important buried under Temple Mount in Jerusalem. But what? Some believe it was a great treasure of ancient relics, while others are sure it was the Ark of the Covenant itself. The least fantastical theory is that they found relics and manuscripts which contain the secret traditions of both Judaism and ancient Egypt. And what they found completely changed their beliefs from Christianity to the more ancient Kabbalah.
I think it's likely that they found earlier documents that were more accurate about Christianity. I don't think they completely went Islamic or pagan. I think they remained a certain amount of Christianity, but a much more Gnostic version of Christianity, a much more mystical version. I think they may have come across alternative scriptures, alternative gospels, earlier gospels, because a lot of things we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we see echoed down through Freemasonry towards the Middle Ages, which points to the Templars as a source.
What the Templars came back with from the East wasn't things, it was ideas. And you've got to remember that part of the world has always been a ferment of ideas. It's where, after all, Christianity, Judaism, Islam began. So it's entirely likely that they were influenced by earlier forms of Christianity, or by scientific Islam, or by Judaism, or by Sufism. There's a whole array of things that they may have been influenced by. We know at the time that people wrote about people who went out to Jerusalem going native. And so it's entirely possible that in a kind of an intellectual sense, in a spiritual spiritual sense that the Templars went native and came back with ideas that were completely unpalatable to Western Europe.
They found something that actually went back far before Christianity, going back possibly 4,000 years, paganism. And I think what they found may well have inspired them to actually be enacting some of the pagan rituals that they found more convincing than Christianity. Perhaps they found the true meaning of religion, the true meaning of life.
One of the many rumors about the Templars' time in Jerusalem is that they found evidence that Jesus did not die on the cross. It's an incredible idea. These Christian knights discovering hard evidence that would disprove and undermine their faith. But was it possible?
The Quran states that Jesus didn't die on the cross. In the West, it's only just becoming an idea that maybe he didn't die on the cross. In the Bible, there's a certain amount of evidence that says, well, they didn't break his legs, he wasn't up there long enough to die. And he's walking around afterwards with physical wounds that people are touching. So it may be that the Templars came back and thought the crucifixion didn't happen. We know better. And once you learn that, you can't unlearn it. So if they found earlier documents and they were given rituals or information that had any kind of power, that did anything, it was more valuable to what they'd found in Christianity.
We tend to have a very uniform view of what Christianity means, but if you actually trace it back over all the different periods, there have been many different groups of people who called themselves Christians. In the early days, there were the Gnostics, who had some very strange rites that we wouldn't think of as Christian today. And in the medieval period, of course, there were the Cathars, at the same time as the Templars, who again had another interpretation. So yes, the Templars were Christians, and yes, they would have seen themselves as Christians, but there's no doubt that there were some elements of their practice which were not mainstream Christianity.
All praise Baphomet.
All praise Baphomet.
The most pertinent thing about this heretical approach is that there's no place for a pope, there's no place for bishops, there's no place for priests. This is them and their relationship with the divine, however they want to express it in a very bodily, in a very physical way. And that's completely anathema to the Catholic Church. And maybe what the Templars were doing was going back to a pre-Christian approach to rejoicing in the physical and its relationship with the divine.
In fact, they may well have found something, some scrolls, some documents of some sort, that actually disproves the whole of Christianity and actually proves that there is something bigger and greater that's been going on for thousands of years. And I'm afraid the church, being totally money-minded, they didn't want this to come out. And so you had to shut up. And they didn't shut up, so they had to be shut down.
In the end, the Templars are confronted by King Philip of France, who owed them lots of money, which he'd borrowed. He brings all manner of wild charges against them, more than likely just to avoid paying his debts.
What Philip of France does, he tries to get money from the Templars, and they deny it. And because he's the King of France, he says, right, I am going to wind this order up. They're too powerful, they're denying me what I want, and he goes to the Pope and gets a papal bull issued that effectively will wind up the Templars.
King Philip owed the Templars a phenomenal amount of money. And the best way he could get out of paying them back was to invent dreadful things about them and have them done away with. He said that they were blasphemous, they were conducting homosexual acts, they were urinating on the cross, they were worshipping a pagan deity called Baphomet.
In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
There are all kinds of rumors that
tend to circulate around the Knights Templar of their involvement in things like satanic worship and black magic and the occult. Do you think there's any truth in those rumors?
Probably not, because the Templar had a lot of enemies. They were very powerful, and one of these enemies was the King of France. He needed money, and he wanted to attack the Templar, so he spread a lot of rumor.
Do you think the King of France may have imprisoned the Knights Templars here at the castle?
Yes, like every prison in France, the castle of Gisors had Templar prisoner, Jacques de Molay and others.
King Philip eventually orders the arrest and imprisonment of all Knights Templars, and even personally interrogates 72 Templars himself. Probably under excessive torture, the prisoners confessed to many of the charges the king brought against them. The day would live on in infamy. It was Friday the 13th, 1307.
The French king brought 127 different allegations against them, and that included blasphemy, denying Christ, obscenity and homosexuality, and idol worship. And it's the idol worship that people have seized on as being devil worship. Some of the knights did confess to having worshipped an idol in the form of a head or a cat.
If we believe the confessions, there's a huge amount that they're accused of doing weird rituals of worshipping the devil and sacrificing and weird sexual rituals that go on. Whether any of it's true, we're never, ever going to know.
When the Knights Templar are arrested in 1307, you ask yourself, who benefits? Well, those who owed them money, clearly the King of France, Rome, lots of people owed them money. But was there another reason? You know, they left Jerusalem so abruptly, as though they found something incredible. Was there something more than just the material that they discovered? That's what I wonder. And is that what they were trying to suppress when they shut them down?
I think the thing that shocked people is the severity with which the king and his forces went after the Templars. Now, superficially, yes, it all comes down to King Philip's debts, he needed the money, etc. But you have to say, on the scale that it happened, is there something else about the Templars? Is there something about their belief system, about their practices, about the threat that they pose to authority, to the church, and to the monarchy as well, to the medieval world?
Whether the Templars were heretics or not, one thing is certain: they were extremely wealthy. When King Philip had them arrested, he also ordered the confiscation of their wealth, properties, and treasure.
When they threw open the doors of the Templar headquarters and at Gisors and the castles, all these places had crypts, they all had areas, but they found them empty. They found there's no money. It had all been moved, it had all been secreted away, so it had gone.
The accounts of the time is that the Templars actually managed to make a run for it with a lot of their wealth to the port of La Rochelle, and their wealth was never seen again. When the king's men turned up at the Paris Temple, the wealth that the king had seen on a previous occasion had simply vanished into thin air. And of course, the stories go that that wealth was then taken to Britain, ultimately to Scotland, and maybe onto the New World.
The Templars were a massive society, and they were a secret society, which meant they had sort of a finger in every pie, in every court, in every land. So when the order comes through to arrest them, it's a distinct possibility they'd already heard about it. And therefore, if they had some treasure, they could have squirreled it away somewhere, hidden it in various different strongholds. So the Templar treasure was spread out all over the known world at the time. It wasn't necessarily just in one place.
Because nothing was found, the conspiracy theorists will go, aha, but did you not know that there are all these fleets of Templars ships that were, escaping to islands and places all over the world with treasure? These stories repeat themselves all the time. There's no truth to it at all. They were wound up, their estates and money were confiscated, end of.
After 1307, many thousands of Templars avoid arrest and settle in Switzerland, as well as Scotland, Spain and Portugal, perhaps taking much of their wealth and treasure with them. It is one of the most intriguing and fascinating stories in history. they came and went in just a couple of hundred years, leaving an indelible mark. In that time, they were said to have excavated for holy treasures under Temple Mount in Jerusalem, used whatever they discovered to finance a huge banking setup across Europe, the first of its kind, and taken part in secret and possibly demonic ceremonies. Perhaps most controversially of all, had they discovered some truths or evidence about the story of Christ, which led them to oppose the church? So was the truth that they'd simply become too rich and powerful for their own good? Or was there more to their fall than meets the eye?
There are two equally plausible reasons why they were shut down. One, a lot of important people owed them money. Two, they had found relics and information that was heretical, i.e. not what the church was marching to. So they wanted that information taken away, information about the true origins of Christianity. It was information that was threatening and information that they were using for their own spirituality. Maybe those rituals that look really dark weren't. Maybe that was their understanding of who the true God really was from these ancient texts they discovered.
There was something about the Templars. They posed a threat to the king. The king was frightened that they had the resources to maybe set up their own kingdom within France. And the church clearly had issues with the Templars. Was there something that the Templars knew? Was there something that they'd learnt in Jerusalem that posed a threat to ecclesiastical authority? Whatever it was, they were wiped off the face of the earth in a very short period of time.
If you look at the Templars today, they've become something of a legend. The mythology, the glamour, I think, around them is something that has lasted, far longer than their reign.
The Templars were incredibly important in history. They really are pretty much the source of all Western secret societies. The Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the modern Templar orders, you can trace them all back to the Knights Templar. The first real swathe of alternative history coming through from the Holy Land, from the Near East, coming into Europe, starting to permeate European ideals, European culture, art, everything. It all goes back to the Templars. It all comes from them.
The Knights Templar are a real enigma of history. They might have only lasted just over 200 years, but their presence survives to this day, with hundreds of Templar societies around the world, all proudly, if, let's face it, slightly erroneously, claiming their origins back to those original French knights who set off for the Holy Land. So what, if anything, did they find under Jerusalem all those years ago? Well, the fact is, no one really knows for sure, but they were said to have brought a small fortune in gold and treasures back to their various commanderies in Europe, including here at Gisors. It's ironic then that when the order went out on Friday the 13th, 1307, to arrest them all and take their goods and chattels, nothing was ever found. In his bestseller, Foucault's Pendulum, the late writer and historian Umberto Eco wrote a fascinating postscript to the Templars. The order has never ceased to exist, not for a moment. And if the name of the true Grand Master remains a mystery today, an impenetrable secret known only to the truly enlightened, it is because the hour of the order has not struck and the time is not yet ripe. I'll see you next time. At the height of the Cold War in the 1960s and 70s, the Bulgarian state security services once had a top-secret, highly trained unit responsible for the assassination of enemy agents around the world. Now, it used all manner of spy gadgets to kill its targets, including bullet-firing umbrellas and poison knives.
and it became known as the Murder Bureau.
There is everything to play for. You had to have spies and double spies who had skills in espionage, tracking, monitoring, kidnapping, and of course, killing and wiping your traces clean.
Its targets are dissidents, but also former intelligence agents who've defected. Those are the ones who are really hated. Those are the ones who are regarded as traitors.
This was all really James Bond. All of the gadgets, sort of reminiscent of a Q, whether it's the umbrellas or the pellets, and all of the sort of the covert ways that this was done.
The whole damn thing was very secret, undercover, and of course could have, for want of a better word, blown up big time into World War III.
During the Cold War, the Bulgarian Secret Service had a top-secret and highly trained kill squad who were tasked with eliminating people on foreign soil. It was called the Murder Bureau and was designated simply as Service 7. Details of who was assassinated and why have only come to light in the past 10 years or so, and even today, this whole subject is considered classified, and very few people here in Bulgaria want to talk about it.
In many ways, the Murder Bureau was straight out of the novels of Ian Fleming and Len Deighton. Anonymous men slipping unnoticed in and out of European cities, carrying out stealthy assassinations using all manner of bizarre James Bond-like gadgets. The targets of these operations carried code names such as the Black, Traitor, X, Hamlet, Betrayer, and Widower.
The Murder Bureau was a covert counter-espionage unit created by the Bulgarian Communist Party to carry out the most sensitive and deadly of operations against enemies of the state.
You've got to imagine this is the time of the Cold War. Anyone that's seen as a political dissident, and this doesn't have to be someone that's actually protesting. It can be a journalist, it can be a writer, it could be a lecturer. They're seen as a threat. Then this murder squad, which is actually made up by a handful of people, something in the region of a dozen people, goes out and gets the job done.
Service 7 was very, very secretive. To be quite honest with you, even to this day, if you interviewed, say, the head of the Secret Service, he probably wouldn't know, certainly the names of most of his operatives. They had code names, all manner of ways of keeping it very, very secret.
Alexeyevna Dimitrova is a Bulgarian investigative journalist who has spent over 20 years looking into the files and history of the Murder Bureau. Over the last 10 years, she has been able to compile a detailed and extensive list of the operations, agents, and methods since its creation back in 1964.
It was very secretive. There's only rumors at the beginning of 90s. I was not able to find any documents until 2006. And before that, I sued the Bulgarian intelligence service because I wanted these documents, and they said me, no, we don't have any documents. But later on, I was able to obtain these documents and to find some interesting stuff there. I found documents that they targeted, they pursue Bulgarian defectors abroad. And I found out documents that they pursued more than about 10 Bulgarian defectors to 9 countries around the world to try to poison them, to kill them, to kidnap them. In a way, it was hit squad.
Within the Bulgarian intelligence service, Service 7 was very much need to know. It was secret within secret, and it was dedicated to tracking, monitoring, and then eradicating dissidents, but not dissidents within Bulgaria, dissidents who had gone abroad. So if they were going to kill them, it involved something very subtle and out of the ordinary. They couldn't use guns in the street of, say, London. I mean, it's a major point that they were actually operating on somebody else's sovereign territory.
Service 7 was not so big in the beginning. When they established it in '64, I read in the documents that they were only 7 people, and I even have the list of the people. But in late '60s, they become probably 20, even more, because they need more personnel to carry on these tasks.
The murder bureau was clearly very secret. Like, unless you were at the very, top echelons of Bulgarian intelligence, you didn't know. And in effect, it had to be this secret. These people were there to assassin. They were there to decide who was doing something wrong and to execute them almost immediately. So the fewer people that knew, the safer it was to carry out what was sort of the ultimate penalty.
The most famous assassination by the Murder Bureau took place on Waterloo Bridge in London on September the 11th, 1978. The victim was Georgy Markov.
Markov's murder was straight out of a spy novel and seen as a chilling indicator of the Bulgarian Secret Service's ruthlessness. Markov was waiting for a bus here on Waterloo Bridge when someone brushed past him. He felt a sharp stab in his leg, but at the time thought nothing more of it. 4 days later, he died in hospital.
Georgy Markov remains one of the most intriguing hits of the Murder Bureau. He leaves Bulgaria when it's still a communist country, and he's absolutely disgusted with the politics there. So for the next 9 years, he's on the BBC, he's on Radio Free Europe, just giving it his all about how corrupt his country is.
Now, this guy had defected from Bulgaria about 10 years previously, and he was, very vocal in the UK about what had gone on in Bulgaria. He was on the BBC talking about it. He was writing about it. So he was a thorn in their side.
He's a very, very powerful voice against the Bulgarian regime, and the regime wants him silenced. And of course, this is the job for Service 7. One evening, early evening, Markov is crossing Waterloo Bridge, and he waits by the bus stop just at the top of the bridge to get his bus to the BBC, where he is working. And suddenly he feels this prick in the back of his thigh. And he turns round, bewildered as you might be, to see a man who's dropped an umbrella, then races across the road and gets into a cab and scuttles off.
They chose to shoot him with a pellet gun designed to look like an umbrella on Waterloo Bridge, where there's hundreds of people during the day. And the reason that this worked so well is because, Markov didn't even notice. I mean, he kind of felt something hit his leg. It was a bit uncomfortable, but he goes off to work. He speaks to his colleagues about being bitten, by being stung by something that's kind of getting really uncomfortable and itchy.
Over the next few hours, he begins to feel more and more sick, more and more unwell, and he goes to hospital. But of course, no one knows exactly what is happening to him until a very sharp-eyed medic suddenly spots this small capsule embedded in his leg, and it soon emerges that this is actually this very, very dangerous compound called ricin.
That was it then. The balloon went up, the press got hold of it, and he died within 4 days. And then things really got serious, and of course the story went worldwide. And of course, that's really what Service 7 wanted.
Very few today will admit to being part of the Murder Bureau or discuss their operations. But Alexenia has tracked down a small number of people here in Sofia who have agreed to meet me, including the daughter of one of its targets. Natalia Michneva's father was a Bulgarian agent who fell foul of his bosses in Sofia. The result was an attempted poisoning.
So, Natalia, why was your father targeted by Service 7?
Може би по-скоро е трябвало да бъде наказан за решението да бъде свободомислящ. Аз поне така смятам. Не мисля, че той е представлявал някаква опасност за властта и за системата.
He was working for the Bulgarian state security. This is very official in the documents. They sent him abroad in Oxford as a student, undercover. And after that, because he defected, they wanted probably to punish him, and he got a death sentence. So for a while, for a short time, he was kind of part of the Bulgarian intelligence.
Did they ever try and kill your father?
Много по-късно, когато се запознах с материалите по делото на баща ми, разбрах, че неговия баща, моя дядо, е бил изпратен в Англия, за да поговори с него и да го убеди да се върне. Като подарък дядо ми е носил парче луканка, оставил му го е. Баща ми се усъмнил в цялата тази работа и след като дядо ми си е тръгнал, е дал парче от тази луканка на някакво куче, което след малко умряло. И е твърдял пред близките си, че наистина се опитват да го убият, макар че отначало не всички са приемали това като достоверно. Смятали са го за параноя. Но е така.
There are so many people in Bulgaria who have lost their fathers. They disappeared, probably in the night. No one knew where they'd gone, no one knew what happened to them. And sometimes 40, 50 years later, the researchers are now being able to go to these documents and actually tell these orphans, for want of a better word, what happened to Dad, and at least lay the ghosts to rest.
There is very little evidence left of communist Bulgaria and the Cold War in Sofia today. But Alexania has managed to get me access to the former headquarters of Bulgarian intelligence. It was in this building, in the 60s and 70s, that hundreds of political prisoners were kept, questioned, and tortured.
Okay, this building is now National Archive, but it used to be, until 1972, the headquarters of the Bulgarian State Security. And come, I will show you something very interesting, I promise. Here, in the basement, there were cells of the Bulgarian State Security, where they probably torture people or whatever things they can do to political enemies.
This building was infamous in Bulgaria and feared by many. If you were brought back here in the 60s and 70s for questioning, it was going to be a brutal time.
Be careful, because here is a little bit dark. Be careful. Okay, be careful.
Yeah. So this is the basement of the Secret Service building?
Exactly, yeah, yeah.
So prisoners were kept in here?
Yeah, in this used to be cell probably, and they kept the prisoners here, and they tortured them, and they beaten them severely just to extract some evidences from them.
It must have been terrifying.
I think so, yeah. It's really very, you know, see this, it's the smell of probably here, so people's blood is around this walls.
So tell me what might have gone on in this room?
I heard about witnesses who they hear screamings outside of the building here, because obviously the tortures of people were just severe.
So you've spoken to people who might have been held in this cell.
Yeah, yeah.
And what did they tell you?
That it was just cruel, very, very severe beatings.
Not much remains of communist Bulgaria, but in Sofia there is a building that is probably the last testament to the murder bureau, where it has cells, little rooms that were probably used as torture chambers, where members of the bureau would interrogate and try to persuade in every manner possible the enemy of the state to reveal their secrets.
Where is the light? Oh, that's it. Yeah. Yep. So nowadays it's just normal building. You see, they put the pipes for the central heating, but time ago it's obviously just regular cell.
So they'd have chained political prisoners up in here and then beat confessions out of them, is that?
I would say political enemies, the people who are severe anti-communists, like my father, for instance. I don't know, has he been here, but eventually he has been, because later he was sent to labor camps.
So hang on, your own father might have been kept down here?
Might be, I don't know, because when I read his secret file, I didn't know evidences where he has been interrogated, but after that I read documents that he has been sent to labor camps for his anti-communists.
These are makeshift prison cells where people would have been beaten and confessions extracted.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a scene from Midnight Express. I can imagine the interrogators washing the blood from their hands in that scene.
Absolutely true, you are right. But I want to show you something more. It's a kind of electrical system which is going to a big tube with water, and with electricity they torture people eventually. It sounds like, you know, very scared.
They're electrocuting prisoners here.
Yeah, I've heard about it, yeah.
That must have been hell.
Yeah.
In that basement, obviously a chair, you'd be sat there, you'd be interrogated, probably beaten, but also still preserved, there are two boxes, electrical boxes from the 60s that are not connected in any way now, but were originally apparently connected to a metal bed. People would be strapped to the bed. All manner of electrocution to various parts of the body would be carried out. This was a dirty war.
Boris Volodsky was a spy who worked for the powerful military intelligence unit of the mighty KGB during the latter days of the Cold War. He agreed to meet with me and shed what light he could on the Murder Bureau and its operations.
I used to be an officer of the Russian military intelligence, and particularly of the special forces of the Russian military intelligence, which is called the Spetsnaz, which is a rough equivalent of the British SAS. This is the group of officers that are involved or planned to be involved in special operations in case of a necessity or in case of a war, behind the lines, deeply behind the lines.
So what kind of activities were you expected to do?
Depending upon the situation, of course, could be blowing up bridges, could be poisoning waters in a certain location, could, under certain circumstances, be assassinations of the targets appointed by the commanding officers.
Their targets were mainly emigres from Bulgaria, people that were dissidents that had left the country. Some of them were genuinely anti-Soviet and communism. Others had just left the country because they weren't too happy and they got a job somewhere else, but they were all targeted.
How active were these agents in Soviet satellite states like Bulgaria?
Every secret service of every Soviet satellite country or Warsaw Pact country, they were under complete control of the Russian KGB. They had a representative in the appropriate ministry. They had a liaison officer with the secret service, and they were completely controlling all secret services of all former socialist countries. So there were reports on a daily basis, reporting of what's going on, and all operations were coordinated by Moscow.
So the KGB were fully operating in Bulgaria?
They were fully controlling operations in Bulgaria.
Right.
Not operating, because they didn't need to operate.
It was all clandestine. It was all behind the scenes. There were spies, super spies, and the whole damn thing really could have blown up big time into World War III.
The murder squad's key objective was what they called stealthy assassinations. They would slip into cities like London or Paris or Rome, make the hit, and then get out undetected. Now, because of this, they couldn't use conventional weapons, so they had to adapt everyday objects, like umbrellas, for instance, to deadly effect. And they've got examples of that right here. Thank you.
Babtis are a theatrical armourer who provide weapons and ammunition for major films and television productions. They also have a small collection of spy weapons, which have been filmed over the years, all faithful replicas of real-life items.
I brought along some weapons from the army just to show you. These are some of the spy weapons that would be used in spies and special forces type things.
OK. They're all film props, right?
No, they're actually not. No, they're all live weapons. Each one of these is live firing, OK? So be careful when you're handling them, OK?
Right, OK. So talk me through this. What's this one here?
This one is a Stechkin. This is a Soviet-made Stechkin. We press the button here, take the pistol out. There is a pistol. I'll take out the magazine. See that it's clear and safe, there's nothing in it. OK. Pistol, very simple. Fired at close range, OK, not a problem. Mostly accurate out to about 10, 15, 20 metres maybe. But with the addition of this, I can make it into a carbine.
Brilliant. And who would have used something like this?
This would have been used by an officer in the sort of late 60s, 70s and early 80s sort of thing.
How about this one?
This one is a Chinese pistol. It's a Type 56 pistol. It's completely silent. As you can see, it's got a silencer built into it. Very easy to hide. Take it out, completely quiet.
So that's the kind of thing that spies would have used, is it?
Spies would use all kinds of silenced pistols, yeah.
Now, I know what that is. That's a dagger, right?
That's a knife, yeah. Take it out and have a look. So there you go. That's a Spetsnaz dagger. There's something very special about that.
It's quite heavy.
Yep. The reason it's heavy, it's actually a gun as well. If I take out the back, unscrew it, you can see 4 holes. Oh. This is where the cartridges go. There's a bullet, little 2-2. Would fit in there. You see there's a little sight, little barleycorn sight there and there. That's the trigger. And if you squeeze the trigger, mind your fingers, 4 shots.
That's extraordinary. So if you miss him with a gun, finish him off with a blade.
Getting close with a blade, yeah. It's a nice little boot dagger. It can go in the boot, go on the belt. It's very easily concealable.
And so, again, was this the kind of thing that would have been standard issue in an army, or would this have been for...
In the Soviet army, yeah. In the Russian military, definitely, they would have these sort of things.
Right.
This is a Russian weapon.
Right.
But again, can be used by the ex-former Baltic states, Soviet states. You know, they had a lot of this stuff and it was made.
KGB, possibly?
KGB, definitely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like that? Wow.
The Soviet bloc and the Bulgarian Secret Service developed the most kind of mind-boggling array of secret weapons that are like something out of Q Branch in the James Bond films. You have, of course, the famous poison umbrella, but also then you have what something looks like a knife, but actually inside the handle is 4 bullets. You've got a whole dazzling array of weapons, and also what you've also got the use of are very, very nasty poisons, like ricin. So the weapons they develop are inventive and incredibly unpleasant.
This is actually a pen gun. If I unscrew the actual pen bit of it itself, take it out, you can see there's a pen and the biro, which actually writes.
Right, OK.
And the rest of it is a gun inside there, which I can pull back and fire. And if I unscrew it, you can see where the cartridge goes. Two to in. There we go, like that, fits in there.
So we're kind of moving into proper James Bond territory now.
Exactly.
I just imagined they were just made for the films and that they weren't.
No,
actually.
they were really. They were during the Second World War. Pens like this were in .32 caliber. They fired the other way, and they were issued to SOE, you know, the Special Operations Executive of, you know, the MI5 and MI6 and things that worked behind enemy lines with the Nazis. And they progressed from then into the Soviet era and the post-war stuff. Pen guns, even lipstick guns as well. Women had lipstick guns.
Really?
Yeah, they had .22 caliber or .32 caliber inside the lipstick. They pull them back and fire them.
That's amazing. So the firing pin is in there, so that just works.
Pull it back,
pulling
pulling it back and letting go.
Sprung mechanism, and that is it.
Yeah. Again, you'd have to be very close to use it.
Right. Okay. And you could that would kill someone, would it?
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
That is terrifying. And do they make these today?
They do make those today. Yeah.
When you're in Service 7, you're assassins on foreign soil. You had to have something quite subtle. A lot of the weapons used by Service 7 seem to be straight out of James Bond. You know, fountain pens that actually fire pellets of poison, this kind of thing. I mean, it was a natural progression from what various intelligence agencies had used during the Second World War. Which were astonishing, you know, including things like exploding camel dung.
And, well, I know what this is. This is an umbrella.
Correct.
What does it do, apart from keep you dry?
It's a gun.
It's a gun.
Right, let me show you. If I twist, pull it back, OK, I'll just unravel it a little bit so you can see where the cartridge goes.
It is a working umbrella.
It's a working umbrella. And they have a 410 shotgun cartridge, fits in the breech, OK, closes out. I won't load it just yet. You close it up. You can walk with it. And when you're ready, can you see the trigger? You point it, fire it.
Goodness. That is amazing. It's a beautiful thing as well.
Been beautifully made, yeah. But
there we go.
Self-defense, it's something you'd walk down the street. It's a concealed weapon, the sort of thing a spy could use.
Do you look a bit conspicuous if it was dry, though, wouldn't you?
You would. So if it was dry, why not use a walking stick?
Oh, OK, right. So that's this. What is there? I've seen these as a sword stick, right?
Right. Now, if you twist it and pull it back, that's where the cartridge goes. Close it up again. Right, and twist. And you can walk along. There's no trigger at the moment, so you walk along, pretend that you're a cripple or something or whatever.
Right.
And when you want to fire it, you twist a little ferrule, the trigger comes out. Simple as that.
It's ingenious.
Yeah.
Woo! I wasn't expecting that.
Well, I didn't tell you. And then we unload it.
Okay. And where would you get something like this?
They're made abroad, they're made in this country. Some unscrupulous people would probably make you some or convert one for you.
OK. I'm not in the market for one, I was just intrigued.
I didn't know that.
Bulgarian historian Konstantin Brochev has spent many years investigating the history of Bulgarian intelligence and the work of the Murder Bureau. It makes for a fascinating, if chilling, story.
This Service 7 was a section at the first department of the Foreign Intelligence, which was dealing with the so-called sharp or acute measures. They had two divisions of labor. One was the so-called active measures, propaganda mainly. Those were like making films, making fake articles. This was a very secret department dealing with, in fact, without the euphemism, killing of people.
Let's be clear here. You're talking about state-sponsored assassination.
More or less, yes.
Service 7 actually did have a license to kill from the very top echelons of the Bulgarian government. So therefore, it had to be kept very, very secret because, of course, it's probably breaking technically Bulgaria's own laws and, of course, every law going everywhere else in the world. So it was kept incredibly secret. It had very few people working for it. And, of course, all its documentation is written in this highly deniable style. So instead of having, go and kill someone, it was go and carry out what was called a sharp measure, which is this sort of fantastically sort of dark euphemism for literally ordering someone's death.
What happened to all the documents, all the evidence that the department never existed?
The work of the state security services was so much bureaucratized, and everybody was expecting some step in the back. So there were plenty of traces left all over the place there, and in many documents, in many reports, in personnel files, in working files, in plans for the operations, for reports about the operations and so forth. You can find many traces of this and mentioning of that. So probably we are not able to have the whole documentation of what that Section 7 was doing, but plenty of it is still available.
The aptly named Secret Archives building houses millions of files from the Cold War. Although most, if not all, classified or revealing papers about the operations of the Murder Bureau have long been hidden away, or most probably destroyed, there are some traces left, and Alexandria was given permission to take us inside.
About 10 years ago, nobody knew that this Service 7 existed. Nobody knew that who they have been targeted and so and so. But later on, when I discovered these documents, I was absolutely shocked and surprised that these documents have been preserved. I found that they created this super secret unit in 1963, 1964. And they have plans for what they have doing. And in this particular document, for instance, you can see the nicknames of 8 Bulgarians who defected out of Bulgaria, and this super secret unit targeted outside of Bulgaria in 9 countries.
It's astonishing that now, as a researcher, if you ask the authorities for documentation regarding Service 7, you will get it, and it will not be redacted, and it will be thousands upon thousands of pages with nothing censored. Basically, code names of people, addresses, details. It's all there.
In one of those documents, I was reading absolutely crazy thing. It's written here that our first task here is to bring back to Bulgaria a person who is working against us. And also, it's written here, on a first look, this probably looks like a dirty job, but for us, this is a very noble job.
There are thousands of secret files still preserved in Bulgaria. And the files, even to this day, still show the code names of the spies. It tells you what was done, who it was done to, why it was done. And unlike America and England and other places, it's there, it's open for all to see.
One of the documents which I found, it's written about special actions. And in this particular case, there's a plan what to do here with this guy Mavrov. And the term to do this is 20th of April in 1970. And the names of agents who are directed to go to target these people. So for another guy, this is in London. And this is for another guy in Denmark. And the term to do this is January 70, and so on. So all these plans for doing, and at the end of the year, they make a report what they so far have done with these guys. I was surprised in a way to find nicknames, but at the same time, the real names have been blackened. But I wanted to show something more important. In fact, the interest to this issue started when for first time, I requested documents from the American Secret Archives more than 15 years ago. And I got thousands of pages related to Bulgaria. And one of my biggest surprise came out from these documents. This is a list of Bulgarians who have lived in Vienna, in Germany, in Austria, and supposedly, according to American services, have been agents for Bulgarian secret services. So the most important thing which I found on four places is written about Bulgarian member of Soviet-sponsored kidnapping ring. For first time, and this is 4 names like this, about 4 people.
As a historian, if I'm to look at a former MI5 file or something from CIA files, you just find, black redactions all over it with just a couple of words, the and but, left open. The irony is if you then go to Bulgaria and you look at their files from even Service 7, the murder bureau, you'll find it's remarkably open. You'll find that they've hardly redacted any of it. So, of course, you can look at the files and you can see the code names of some of those who were trying to kill. And you've got this incredible wealth of information that makes it possible for us to really understand what took place.
It's been almost impossible to get anyone from Bulgarian intelligence to talk about their work in the Cold War, let alone actual operations. But we have found one man, General Todor Boyajiv, who agreed to meet me and go on camera. Although his exact role in the spy world is a little foggy, I'm told that he rose to become the deputy of Bulgarian intelligence.
Interestingly, he denies any knowledge of a top-secret hit squad working for them. But, as the old saying goes, he would say that, wouldn't he?
In each intelligence service, not only in Bulgarian intelligence service, in the structure of intelligence, there is counterintelligence unit. Usually there are very, very, very secret, small structures which deal with so-named dirty tricks. Sometimes that means assassination. If there was such a structure, it was so secret that even me, deputy head of the Bulgarian intelligence in charge of information and analysis of political information, I never knew about such a structure.
Service 7 had to be secret, very secret, because obviously we're talking now of the Cold War, we're talking of spies everywhere, people being caught, captured, tortured, and if the guys at the top knew the names of everyone and they were tortured, then there's every possibility that they would give the whole game away. So nobody knew who each other was.
Even though you don't know, and we can't prove it, do you think, on all probability, that they did actually have some super secret unit during the Cold War?
Yes, I know that there was a very, very, very secret unit in the Bulgarian intelligence. But that unit didn't have anything to do with assassination or anything like that. That was a unit in which served top secret Bulgarian intelligence officer. They never entered in their life the building of the intelligence. They didn't have any contacts with their official colleagues, the other officers from the intelligence. In most of the cases, they were known only to the very top of the leadership of intelligence, and their identity was a top secret.
This guy is the quintessential spy chief, and he has been for decades. He's been working with the top 4 or 5 other spy chiefs from other allies and adversaries for decades. He's probably working hand in glove with Russia most of his life. So it's become ingrained in him that he can't reveal anything. This is his training. This is a half-century of training that says, I'm just gonna blog it. I'm gonna tell you I know nothing, and whatever secrets I have, I'm gonna take them to my grave.
In the end, Service 7, the Murder Bureau, was wound down in 1974. It remains one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Cold War.
You have this great disconnect in the 60s between what we think of being the popular culture of the 60s, which is clearly the sort of summers of love and colourful clothing and flares and rock music and people smoking weed and so on and so forth, and that whole counterculture. But of course, underneath it all is this very, very secret Cold War that in the secret world is actually not cold at all. It's incredibly hot because there are spies running around the world bumping each other off.
Many, many years ago, there's a kind of super secrecy crossing around Europe here and there. We didn't know about that years ago, but now when the documents are open, we can easily find out that they kidnap people or poison them or humiliate them or whatever. Because when I published my book about Murder Bureau, I suddenly discovered there's such a similar unit existed in Germany eventually, and also similar service existed in Soviet Union.
The public has no idea that there is everything to play for. Russia, Britain, the United States, world domination is at stake. So there's honey traps, there's spies, double spies, there's all kinds of espionage and weird devices that are being used to poison people, to blackmail people, to get information that you couldn't otherwise get. There was no internet, there were no chat rooms. You had to have spies and double spies. Trust no one was the mantra of the day.
It's not called the Cold War for nothing. You know, it really was a secret war. You've got, you know, the Eastern Bloc, who is fighting against the West. So whether it's America or England or, you know, the rest of Europe, there's constantly something going on, and it's just under the radar.
Now, there are no official figures to refer to, but it's believed that Service 7 killed, kidnapped, or poisoned around a dozen people in highly planned covert operations from 1963 to 1974. They were said to be a great inspiration behind the Bond films of the same time, and you can see why. I'll see you next time. Johann Reichardt was the most famous executioner in Nazi Germany. In a career which spanned just over 20 years, it was said that he put over 3,000 people to death using his specially adapted drop hatchet guillotine. Then, in a bizarre twist of fate, at the end of World War II, he was used by the Allies to execute Nazi war criminals. But who was Reichardt? And what drove him to assassinate so many people in record time?
Johann Reichardt was the last great executioner of the modern era. He killed about 3,000 enemies of the state. Hitler must have loved this guy.
The German guillotine was quick and efficient. There was a bench. You were literally dragged, placed on the bench, head through and off.
It was so dehumanizing, so depersonalized. This man must have not seen his victims as people, but as things to be gotten rid of in as efficient way as possible.
He could pride himself that the person would come in and be dead within 4 seconds. He was a truly professional executioner.
Today, we associate the guillotine with the brutality of the French Revolution, when 16,500 men and women were executed by the device. However, the Nazis were equally devoted to it. They are thought to have beheaded almost as many victims during their 12 years in power, some of which were killed here at Plötzensee prison in Berlin.
In the olden days, executions had been done with a sword for beheading, hanging with a rope broken on the wheel. But in 1853, the Germans took on the guillotine, which of course had been in France since the 1790s. But being Germans, of course, they adapted it and revolutionized it. And it became probably the most efficient, quickest form of execution ever devised anywhere in the world.
With any dictatorship, the most important thing is fear, and not fear necessarily the dictator, but fear of the people around you. The most destabilizing factor, and the thing that all of these dictators do, is they make you feel that you can't rely on each other, that someone's always out to get you, that the people closest to you, and in fact, that's what ends up happening. There's so many executions because, you know, I can say something in, you know, I don't know, in the heat of the moment that I think what Hitler's doing is wrong, but if I've said it and you've heard it and you point at me, well, then that's all it takes.
Really, Reichardt executed whoever he was told to, and these are the people who received the harshest sentences from the People's Court. Political dissidents, those who were suspected of anti-war protest, those who were speaking out in the radio about the government. It's really anyone that stood in the way of the Third Reich doing what they wanted to do. That's who he was killing.
Johann Reichardt was born in Bavaria in southeast Germany in 1893 to a family of professional executioners which went back 8 generations. His own career started in 1924 and went right up to the end of World War II as the premier executioner for the Nazis. He travelled across the country, taking his guillotine with him, dressed formally in a dark top hat and jacket with white gloves. It's reported that he executed over 3,000 people in total, most of them during the war period of 1939 to 1945.
Reichardt came from a family who had been in the execution trade for generations. And the family, as well as executing people, were also knackers. Which is the word used for people who are, dismembering animals that are unfit for human consumption. So you have this equation between, just killing a human being or killing an animal. It's all the same to the Reichardt family. They're just in the kind of, the grisly business of butchering animals and humans.
he will have seen his trade not as the gruesome thing that it was, but actually as something to be done as effectively and as efficiently as possible. You know, if you're surrounded by it, if you grew up around it, then like anything, you think, okay, how can I do this better? And in fact, he did find a way of doing this more efficiently. He actually adapted the guillotine so that it could be transported. He would literally have a smaller guillotine with just a heavier blade on the back of a truck, and he would stop in places and get people onto this truck and then kill them one after the other.
The thing about Reichardt was he was an obsessive executioner, and he was determined to make his mark. Being a good German, he was all for efficiency. And basically, the idea was the least mess, the fastest execution is great.
The man was pushed into the garishly lit room. In front of him, a smartly dressed man in a frock coat and top hat. His attention was distracted by the sight of a long black table in the center of the room, attached to which were buckles and straps. And rising above the table, hanging menacingly high, was a huge silvery black blade. Within a few moments, the condemned man was bound, face down on the table, and a steel rod was pressed onto his back. With his face looking into a basket, his nostrils detected the smell of dried blood over the stench of disinfectant and sawdust. This, he knew, was the very minute of his death. This gruesome scene comes from a classic 1947 novel by Hans Fallada called Alone in Berlin. It is based on the tragic true story of Otto and Elise Hampel, a working-class couple who were guillotined here in Berlin's notorious Plötzensee prison in 1943 for distributing anonymous postcards denouncing the regime.
Reichardt executed enemies of the party. So in a way, he probably held on to that to help him get through this. He believed that this party was going to take Germany forward, that they were doing good work. So anyone that was a threat to that was the person that he killed. And it didn't discriminate between male or female or young or old, educated, uneducated. This was just about whether you're in the in-group or the out-group. People that I think are of value or people that I devalue completely.
Reichardt was said to be a dour man who rarely smiled or showed any emotion as he went about doing his job. And at the end of the war, it was reported that he tossed his famous guillotine into a river in shame. Richard Felix, a historian who runs Derby Jail, is an expert on crime and punishment in the 19th and 20th centuries. He has built an exact replica of Reichardt's guillotine.
This is a replica of a Fallbeil. That's German for drop hatchet. It's a version of the guillotine, but a precision version created by the Germans. Made of oak and metal, much more efficient than any guillotine ever knew how to be. Johann Reichardt, the German executioner, designed this and made it probably the most efficient form of execution ever created. All that happened was that the blade was wound to the top in preparation. The delinquent was then dragged out of here by the two assistants and strapped onto the bascule. This was then tilted forward, and he was then slid all the way through there. Reichardt then dropped the lunette, trapping the neck, and then all was ready. The judge then came forward and said, Henker, auftreten zu Ihrem Aufgabe. Executioner, perform your task. And at that point, he pulled the lever, and down came the blade, and the head was off. It's the most efficient form of execution ever created.
Reichardt was a utilitarian in every sense of the word. So he'd show up and he'd get the job done. There was no frills. There was, no smiling or apologizing. At the same token, there was no, jeering or swearing or bullying. He was there to do a job. And in his case, there was almost a robotic, nature to what he was doing. He would, everyone was more or less the same, and it was just about getting through it as quickly and as effectively as possible.
But it wasn't quick enough for Reichardt. So what he did was he had the bascule removed. No more strapping you on. No more wriggling about. You were dragged out by the two assistant executioners, brought forward, slid straight onto it. That dropped, and the blade dropped. He could get someone executed in 3 seconds, and he could get this machine reloaded with another body and the blade down in 30 seconds.
What made Reichardt really effective is his innovation. He abandoned the old French all-wooden guillotine and created his own. Smaller, shorter, 8-foot high, heavy blade. Gone are the straps that put the victim in. People hold him. You don't have time to strap people in. There's so many of them. So boom, the head's chopped off. There's a special funnel that takes the blood out in front where there's sawdust that absorbs it. He has all this innovation. He had to kill more people faster than anyone ever before.
Reichardt was dressed as a traditional German executioner. Top hat, dicky bow, white shirt and frock coat and white gloves. He was the epitome of the German executioner. He was unfeeling and basically did his job. It was just a job to him, nothing more. And I presume he had no feeling whatsoever for that 3,000 people that he dispatched on a machine like this one.
One of the things that strikes you when you look at photographs of Reichardt going about his desperately sinister business was not only the way he was dressed like a very particular grotesque ringmaster of a circus, but also his face showed absolutely no emotion. It was as if it'd been wiped clean. It was actually as if he was in the zone of an executioner's mind, whatever that might be.
Reichardt dressed like an undertaker. It's very funereal. And I think it's there to act as a kind of barrier between him and the victim. It's saying, I am simply an anonymous person. And we see it today with ISIS, how the executioner in these awful, awful videos that ISIS put out is always dressed in a specific way. It's not there to create terror, I suggest. It's there to create formality.
It is often forgotten that when the Nazis took office, they were initially cautious about using the death penalty. Their grip on power was not as firm as it would come to be, and they were aware that public opinion might turn against them if they executed too many of their own citizens. However, in October 1936, acting on the advice of his justice minister, Franz Gürtner, Hitler decided that the guillotine should be Nazi Germany's preferred method of execution. 20 guillotines were secretly ordered and distributed to prisons across the Reich. On September the 7th, 1943, Reichardt executed 168 people on one night.
Hitler ordered 20 Fallbeils to be built and put around the prisons in Germany. They were made smaller than the guillotine, so they could fit inside small rooms with low ceilings, obviously prisons. But when Reichardt actually had to travel from one prison to another prison to do the executions, legend has it that he actually had a portable Fallbeil mounted on the back of a van. The delinquent was actually dragged to the back of the van and beheaded on the back of it. Now that's quick.
At the peak of Reichardt's professional career, he was executing tens of people a day. And the governor would order this bell to be rung. And so all the prisoners would know when this bell was ringing that an execution was taking place. And when the bell stops, the execution was over and one of their prisoners was dead. And it was a fate that anybody in that prison, especially during the Nazi regime, knew that they too could face. They could be the person causing that bell to ring and then to stop.
One of Reichardt's most famous victims was a young girl called Sophie Scholl, who was a 21-year-old opponent of the Nazi regime who was beheaded on February the 22nd, 1943. Her crime was to have been a leading member of the White Rose movement, which had peacefully resisted the regime by writing anti-Nazi leaflets and distributing them around university students in Munich. At 5 p.m. that day, she was led from her cell to a small building which contained the guillotine and strapped down. Within seconds, the young woman's head lay in a bloodied basket.
It was supposedly a non-political anti-war group, which of course was totally frowned upon by the Nazi Party. Her and her brother and some of the other people, they were distributing leaflets, propaganda leaflets, telling the public to basically revolt against the Nazis.
They were arrested by the Gestapo, handing out anti-Nazi leaflets, and basically taken to the so-called People's Court. This was after being interrogated for 4 days by the Gestapo. Not fun. And then they were handed over to Johann Reichardt for execution.
Sophie Scholl has become one of the key figures that we associate with resistance to the Nazi regime. She was, of course, this incredibly tragic figure because she was betrayed, she was captured, and she was executed. And she was executed by Reichardt. And there must have been something crossing through his mind as he's taking this sort of young woman in her 20s onto his contraption. And he's, you know, chopping her head off.
It's estimated that some 16,500 people were killed by the Nazis using a guillotine, most of them between 1939 and 1945. As a result, executioners like Reichardt became very wealthy. He was paid a basic salary of 3,000 Reichmarks a year and received an extra 65 as a bonus per execution. In the end, he amassed over 200,000 Reichmarks, worth well over £1 million today.
Being an executioner in Germany was a well-paid job, and of course, the more people you're executing, the more money you're going to earn. So when he starts off, he's earning 3,000 Reichsmarks a year, which is, you know, a decent kind of lower middle-class wage. By the time the Nazis come into power, and during the war, and as the insanity and madness of the regime and the murderousness of the regime comes into full effect, his income's gone up to 36,000 Reichsmarks a year, which makes him a very wealthy man.
The interesting thing is that Reichardt was killing enemies of the state faster than anyone ever had, and he wasn't fazed by that. You can argue that it was the most humane thing he could do, is just get on with it, kill him quick, chop the head off next, take away that anxiety. But in reality, he's getting paid. He's a professional killer, and he's making a lot of money doing it.
As if, you know, having your relative executed by Reichardt and the Nazi state wasn't appalling enough, the family would then receive a bill from the state for the cost of the execution. It would have on it the cost of Reichardt's fee, some 600 Reichsmarks. It would have, you'd be invoiced for all the processing costs, and also, most awful of all, you'd also be invoiced 12 pfennigs for the cost of the stamp, which was used to pay for the invoice to be posted to you. So in fact, Reichardt wasn't paid for by the state. He wasn't paid for by taxpayers' money. He was paid for by the people who he was killing.
It's a very powerful feeling when you're in the execution chamber here, and it's quite hard to describe, but there is a real sense of dread, of darkness, and a sense of loss, which still lingers today.
In the final months of World War II, Berlin was under constant air bombardment from the Allies. And yet Reichardt continued to carry out his executions in and around the capital. As a result, he spent long periods of time alongside other top Nazi officials in underground bunkers as the city was destroyed above them.
Now, very little of what was wartime Berlin remains today. Most of it was destroyed at the end of the war. But this is one of the last remaining bunkers, and I've been given special access to have a look around.
Most of the city has been redeveloped, and many of the old Nazi buildings and structures have been destroyed. Hitler's famous Führer bunker has been filled with cement and built over with a housing estate. But there still are a couple of military bunkers left which you can still enter, including this one, in the Berlin suburbs, which was used by senior Nazi officers and, it's said, Johann Reichardt himself.
Hello.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. What about you?
Thank you. Thank you for showing me around. Thank you.
Get in.
Wow. Lead on.
So, we have to go 2 floors down now.
Okay.
Then our feet will be 6 meters under Berlin. If you have a flashlight,
yep,
feel free to use it. You can see still the original stairs.
Wow. So how many floors does it go down?
2 floors down and 2 floors up, so 5 floors in total, and about 6,500 square meters.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Yeah, this is the bottom floor.
So tell me who would have been down here in this bunker?
It was supposed only for the high-ranking German officers and their families. But when the Russians were getting on Berlin and into Berlin, all the Germans were pouring into the bunker, and then were up to 14,000 people in here instead of the 3,500 who should be in this bunker.
So it was only designed for 3,500
Yes.
people, and yet there would have been up to 14,000.
Yes, and it was designed for 1 to 2 hours for one air raid, but at the end they stayed in here for about 1 week, day and night.
And so did they have like kitchens and bathrooms down here?
Not kitchens, but bathrooms. I can show you here.
Yeah, please do. Oh, well. It's the bathroom.
Yes.
Obviously, it wouldn't have looked like this when it was built.
Nearly. Of course, some of the toilets are missing now, but the walls were just gray, and there was no color on the wall or anything like that. It was really simple.
But it feels more like a prison rather than a place
Yes.
where high-ranking Nazi officials would have come.
Yes, but it was a time when they realized that the war was not going very well, and so it was more important to be safe than being on a shiny, nice place like the Führer bunker, where it was very nice. While here, they had to build it in like 10 months. So it was, yeah, very raw.
Berlin was in turmoil and was being smashed to pieces. And so something that was built for high-ranking German officers to shelter in, all of a sudden could well have ended up with disease-ridden people down there. The conditions were awful. There was no decoration. The sanitation was poor. The lighting was poor. And it was a very basic air raid shelter.
Without the luxuries found in Hitler's bunker, this bare, damp and disease-ridden shelter would have made life very uncomfortable to survive in. Hardly fitting for high-ranking officials like Johann Reichardt.
What's through here?
Here is a generator which produces some power when the electricity went off. Here was the distribution with all the cables.
Right.
Here are some of the doors made of concrete because they ran out of steel and they thought concrete will do the job.
Wow, look at this.
This is the old generator.
Oh my God, it's like the sort of thing you see on a ship.
Yeah, it looks like it, but it was built for being a generator in bunkers. And it's a straight 8, but it produces only 265 horsepower. So today you have it in a small beamer or something, but at that time it was much bigger.
So hang on, so this thing here, this provided the power for the entire bunker, for all the people living there?
Yes, but only when the power from outside was cut off. So it wasn't bright like now. There were only like 5, 6 light bulbs powered in one floor, and the ventilation system that you could have some air to breathe. But it was really only for emergency.
Right, and this is what, this is run by a diesel, presumably?
Yes, the diesel was in here, but only for like 1 day. You could see here how much diesel was left, and when you need more, you pull this rope, open the valve, and then there was a building outside where there were about 40,000 liters of diesel, then you get more.
So this would pump all the air around the bunker, so without this, everyone, they would have died down here, presumably?
Yes, within a few days.
These poor guys would spend hours, sometimes days, in the pitch black, down there with people choking, vomiting, urinating, defecating. It must have been hell on earth.
This looks like a gurney.
Yes, it is.
Do they have a sanatorium down here?
No, they just died. There were some doctors around who tried to help, but it was not organized. They didn't have any equipment, no medicine, and so on. So they tried their best, but basically, if you get ill, you died, and you could move dead bodies around with this.
They took out the dead on these?
They wanted to, but it was so crowded that they couldn't take them out. It was like on a rock concert. You were pushing them up and then just moving them over your head.
Carried the dead people over their heads?
To the exit, then they piled them up, and when there was a breaking in the bombings, they just throw them out.
The whole of Berlin was literally ridden with rats and disease, cholera. They were taking this down into the bunker with them. People were dying in there, not of bombing, but of disease, and were literally dragged out and thrown outside, and the doors slammed shut again. It's certainly a dreadful, dreadful place, and gives the most awful atmosphere of I think, despair.
Following the surrender of the Nazis in 1945, Reichardt was arrested and imprisoned in Landsberg prison in southern Germany. In a bizarre twist, he was offered a deal by the Allies. Help us execute Nazi war criminals or spend the rest of your life behind bars. He accepted and put 156 Nazi war criminals to death by hanging.
Instead of sending him to prison immediately, they say, well, look, you've got a choice. We'll either put you away or you can come and work for us. And so he then becomes an executioner for the people that had ordered all of those executions over all those years.
It shows how Reichardt has this kind of totally absent moral compass in which he's willing to execute people for whoever. You could also argue, of course, that this is the Allies being incredibly sort of brutal and nasty in their thinking, and thinking, look, well, hang on a minute, it's your own man killing you now. This is how much power we have over you.
When you think about it from the Allies' perspective, they're not skilled at executions. They haven't been doing executions. So they're going to latch on to Reichardt. Of course they are, because he's a professional. But it's also this subtle sort of two fingers to the Germans. So we're going to have your own, famous executioner kill you. And imagine the revenge, the psychological warfare that must have entailed.
A lot of the names of the German officers who were hung by Reichardt came out of a super-secret bugging operation that was run out of 2 country houses just outside London: Trent Park and Latimer House.
during World War II, Latimer House, behind me, became the centre of highly top-secret activities run by MI5 and MI6 under the obscure name Combined Services Detailed Interrogation Unit. Now, no one locally knew its true activities. Even Parliament wasn't privy to its existence. British intelligence realised that the most important assets in wartime are the prisoners who hold a wealth of information. The challenge was how to get the most valuable information out of them. Thousands of German prisoners, including Hitler's generals, would pass through here between 1942 and 1945, and unknown to them, they were secretly bugged.
What's incriminating is the fact that all these German generals are talking about some of the crimes that they themselves have done or crimes they've heard of. This, of course, is massively important evidence for the Allied war crime units. And some of the evidence gathered was then used in trials or to find the guilty men. So, of course, you know, who's then carrying out some of the executions of the people in those trials? It's Reichardt.
Historian and author Helen Fry is an expert on what went on at Latimer House and the intelligence gleaned from its occupants.
This is where it is.
Down into the basement.
Yeah, it's quite complex down here, quite far-reaching.
So would they have kept prisoners down here?
Some of the die-hard Nazis, yes, in isolation for a day or so.
One of those die-hard Nazis was Hitler's deputy Führer, Rudolf Hess, who was taken prisoner by the Allies in 1941.
So there were rumours that Hess was brought to Latimer House for a few days, and this is one of the cells where he was allegedly held overnight before they took him up to the comforted upstairs. So pretty heavy World War II door there.
Oh, wow. So they would have held prisoners in cells like this under the main house, would they?
Yes, it would have been the die-hard Nazis, those that needed a bit, you know, to be more cooperative. They may have held them in isolation, disorientate them, and hope that they would then upstairs be more amenable in interrogation.
Near the end of the war, a place called Latimer House was where high-ranking German generals that had been captured were, when I say imprisoned, were kept a little bit more like house arrest, to be honest with you, and there was a reason for it. They had quite a bit of freedom inside the place. They had their own officers' mess, and they were allowed to talk to each other, and the whole place was bugged.
So how secret was this place?
This was beyond top secret. I mean, this was only declassified in the last decade. And in fact, one of Kendrick's, the commanding officer Kendrick's intelligence officers, when he started here, was told on his first day, what is going on here is as top secret as anywhere in the country. And his pistol was slid across the desk. And he said to him, if you ever betray what goes on here, then you do the decent thing. And if you don't, I will. It's like, whoa.
And these tunnels just seem to go on for miles.
They do, and also you have various cells which have been created off the tunnels, and the documents don't tell us precisely who was held here, but we know they had special areas for die-hard Nazis, uncooperative prisoners, perhaps holding them in isolation for a day, just to kind of break their will of resistance, really.
And where did they do the listening from?
Well, the listening wasn't here. It was in a separate, specially constructed block on the other side of the site. So what's fascinating is you have layers of secrecy, and those that worked, you know, in the bugging operation didn't necessarily know what was going on this side of the site. Just fascinating.
Lead on.
The Allies obviously trying to extract information. They come up with this genius idea to take a bunch of these German generals and put them up in a stately home and say, you know, we've got to keep you here for a few days until, you know, you have these other official meetings so we can gather intelligence. And they just, you know, ply them with, you know, there's good food there, and there's drink, and there's cigars, and they just sit back, bug the place, and listen to what they say.
How important was the intelligence that they gathered?
Well, at this site, the prisoners began to talk about V1, the doodlebug, and eventually the V2, the rocket programme, Hitler's secret weapons. And that enabled Churchill to order Operation Crossbow, which was the bombing of Peenemünde, which was the secret weapon development site.
And that all came from information that was gleaned from the prisoners that were held here?
Here and at the two sister sites of Trent Park and Wilton Park, but also lots of snippets of information which fed into the overall intelligence network, and there was very little we didn't know about Nazi Germany.
Oh, another cell by the looks of it. Oh, my goodness, that's a heavy door.
This is my least favourite cell. This is the grimmest of all of them, actually. Of course, no light, very little air.
So, as far as I understand it, then, the sort of lower-ranking prisoners were kept in cells like this, whereas upstairs in these houses, the higher-ranked officers were wined and dined. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. It was understanding the psyche of your enemy, if you like, and that if you treat them well, because don't forget they thought they could still win the war. If you treat them well, then they will start spilling the beans. They will start talking to each other when they think no one's listening, and start bragging about their war and particularly about the technology, boasting that Germany had better technology and they were going to still win the war. And of course, little realising that the walls had ears, in a sense, and everything was being picked up and recorded.
Yeah. So the traditional interrogation techniques didn't work?
No, this unit didn't use mistreatment of prisoners. Cells like this would be just used to disorientate them for a night, but we have no evidence of torture and that kind of thing because it was ineffective. And the clever part of this deception plan was to understand how to get the prisoners to speak completely freely and unguarded.
They're all held in this beautiful British country house, north of London, and they're made to feel very relaxed. So they're given drinks and brandies and cigars and nice palatial surroundings that they feel befits their status as very, very senior officers. And so, of course, they relax, unaware of the fact that all the rooms have got microphones in them. And you have a lot of former German refugees, who can obviously speak and understand German, listening away, transcribing all these conversations.
The most secret part of Latimer House was the bugging and surveillance done on its German prisoners from the so-called M Room. Fritz Lustig was one of a small team of secret listeners who operated from a small hut in the grounds of the house.
My role at Latimer House was secretly to listen to the conversations of German prisoners of war who had been selected specially to be sent here because it was expected that they provide certain important information to the British authorities.
Give us an idea of the kind of military secrets that were given up during that time.
Well, the military secrets they talked about would be either technical, from saved U-boat crews or saved ex-German Luftwaffe pilots. And they would talk, for instance, about new technical developments fitted to their aeroplanes, which, of course, it was very important for the British to know. And the more details they gave, the more we recorded them, and there were microphones in the trees and the bushes and so on. So they could be listened to wherever they were.
Here you have captured German officers who are given complete freedom to walk around the luxurious grounds. Why were the British allowing that to happen? Well, the rooms are bugged, the bars are bugged, and because you're so comfortable, they could just let their guard down and relax. But the information that the British garnished was incredible. They find out about all sorts of different strategies and secrets and technologies. It was a goldmine and a brilliant approach to interrogation.
The high-ranking German prisoners were generally treated as gentlemen rather than as German prisoners.
And why was that the case?
Because the more relaxed they were, the more they felt at home there, the more they talked to each other, and the more secrets they would spill.
All of these generals were trained how to withstand interrogation techniques, but they felt absolutely safe. They're in this stately home. They're waiting for their interrogation, as it were. So they're sitting around just sharing stories from the field, talking about who they killed, talking about, what, their colonels and their generals did. And they were able, the Allies, to extract so much information from this and use it against them that it was absolute genius.
Did a prisoner ever find a bugging device?
As far as I know, the prisoners never found the bugging devices. Some of them were most, as we said, security conscious, and they would turn on the water taps when they were talking about something secret. But the microphones were of very high quality, and usually we could even understand what they were saying when the water was running.
It sounds a little bit like the Big Brother house.
Well, yes, it was.
So there they were, quite happily bragging about what they'd done, telling each other about who they'd done it to, how they'd done it, who they'd killed. The guys were listening to their bugs and then passing back to the intelligence services. And what they were doing was building a case against themselves and creating more necks for Reichardt's noose.
How important was the intelligence that the whole operation gathered?
Knowing what I know now, I do think that what we did had a very significant impact on the conclusion of the war. And together with what they did at Bletchley Park and what we did at Cystic, I think it probably shortened the war by several years.
It's incredible to think that information gleaned from the spying on top Nazi generals in this building helped to convict many others of war crimes. Ironically, convictions that led some to be hung by Johann Reichard himself back in Germany.
The information that the British get from these officers it's a gold mine. They get names. They're almost bravado, where one is trying to one-up the other. Well, I know about this operation, and this person is in charge. It was all about the names. And what did the British do? They took these names, and they went and they got those people.
We know Reichard executed 3,000 people, and he basically showed no remorse. The only remorse he ever showed was when the Allies got him to execute his own. And then he became troubled.
Did he feel for these people? Or was his job to actually hang the people that he believed in, that had been his bosses, the Nazis? He was a highly efficient bringer of death.
It has to take a very unique kind of person that can go home at night after being surrounded by that much pain and fear and misery, and be able to sleep and eat and get up the next morning and do the same again.
At the end of his life, Johann Reichard was a lonely and disliked person. His marriage had failed, and one of his sons, Hans, committed suicide in 1950 due to his association with his father's profession. And he seems to have had something of a conversion in his old age, when in 1963 there were public demands for the reintroduction of the death penalty in West Germany. Reichard spoke out against capital punishment. He died in Dorfen in Germany in 1972, aged 79. I'll see you next time. It's one of the most famous and historical religious sites in the world. But what secrets does the Vatican really have?
In recent decades, it's been rocked by scandal after scandal. The Vatican Bank, child abuse, and more recently, serious accusations against Pope Benedict XVI and his number 2, Cardinal Bertone. So, what has been going on here behind closed doors? And what does the future hold for the Vatican?
Hidden in the Vatican, they have huge amount of secrets. It is possible they would have the Ark of the Covenant. Nobody knows where it went.
The heretical pieces of art, music, documents, that's the boring stuff. The real secrets, those are relics, things that would cause history to be rewritten.
There's been no doubt that the Vatican, despite promoting kindness to all men and Christianity, also has its dark side.
Over the centuries, the church have accumulated donations and buildings. Nobody knows how much money the church has got, least of all the church.
Corruption and paedophilia has left such a mark on the credibility of the church. I think the Vatican Bank could actually bring down the Catholic Church.
Has the Vatican covered up secrets for centuries? Or is it all just noise created by its many enemies? The Vatican firmly say it's the latter. But are they telling the truth?
Tens of thousands of children worldwide have been abused systematically for years within the Catholic Church.
Vatican finances stem from centuries of intrigue, mysterious deaths, and influence.
Amort made headlines around the world recently when he said the devil was present in the Vatican.
For decades now, the Vatican has been under constant attack from newspapers, authors, historians and critics who claim that it's corrupt and riddled with twisted priests who live immoral and sinful lives behind its walls. Although it vehemently denies it, over the years it's been accused of storing Nazi gold bullion, laundering mafia money, child abuse, and even running slave labour institutions with prostitutes and single mothers in Ireland at so-called Magdalene laundries. Some have even accused it of harbouring satanic worshippers, indulging in black magic, and hiding relics such as the body of Jesus itself. It might sound a little far-fetched, but its accusers are adamant.
There's no doubt that the Vatican has an enormous amount of secrets, because the simple reason it's been around for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years at the nexus of politics, religion. It's the centre of so much of human behaviour over that time. And there's no doubt that there have been, more than its fair share of financial scandal, more than its fair share, perhaps, of abuse. There's a lot about the Vatican that needs cleaning out.
I mean, on the outside, you look at the Vatican, it looks a very, very austere, very religious, fantastic place. But to be honest with you, it's nothing but a house of fun. Even before it was built, still underneath there are bathhouses, brothels, and the same thing applied with the Vatican.
You have to realize this is the wealthiest nation on the planet. They could have built their headquarters, their capital, anywhere. They own so much land. But they chose this spot, which is directly over ancient pagan temples, Mithra temples. I can't believe for a second that it's an accident that Vatican City is situated where it is.
I think any institution that has managed to amass the kind of wealth, the kind of power, the kind of history and mythology that the Vatican has, hasn't done so by giving away all of its secrets.
One of the great mysteries of the Vatican is just what is inside its infamous secret archives that was not revealed when they were officially opened last decade. Journalist Philip Willan has been a Vatican journalist for over 30 years. He's reported on 3 popes, numerous scandals, and knows the Holy See like the back of his hand.
So, Philip, what is in the so-called secret archive?
The secret archive is basically the Pope's personal archive. So the documentation that's generated in the course of running the affairs of the international global church, once they're no longer needed for immediate access and action, they are moved aside and stored in this enormous archive, which of course goes back centuries and tells the history of the Roman Catholic Church in Italy and throughout the world.
For a start, the Vatican Library, the secret library, wait for it, 53 kilometers of documents. Now, they say the oldest one goes to the 8th century. What, are we supposed to believe that, really? 53 kilometers of secret documents. Imagine the truths that are hidden in those.
Of course, this sounds so exciting to conspiracy theorists because they go, wow, a secret archive, what's in there? Now, you've got to first of all think the Vatican Secret Archive in Latin has the word secretum in it, which is translated by some as secret. You can just translate that as private. And actually, that is a more accurate translation of the Latin word secretum. It means it's the Vatican's private archive.
Does the Catholic Church have something to hide in there?
Almost certainly there are things that secrecy applies to very conveniently, and the Vatican does have considerable confidence in its ability to maintain secrets, particularly maintain control over these archives. So one could keep embarrassing documents in there in the confident knowledge that no one else is going to get access to them. So there could be all sorts of things that we don't know about. And of course, that leads to a lot of speculation as to what might be in there.
No one really knows what's in the secret archives, but certainly one would assume that there's something to do there with things like the Ark of the Covenant or the raiding by the Templars of King Solomon's mines. You know, there's always contention around Jesus' bloodline. One wonders if there's something in there around that. So certainly all of those kind of key themes that the church is based on, all of the stories that have been told, people wonder, and it's not surprising, people wonder if there's anything in those secret archives that might go against what people have been taught and told all these years.
Andrew Goff has studied the history of the Vatican for many years. He believes that there is a basic problem at the heart of Christianity that has affected all its actions for well over a millennium. That perhaps it's all nothing more than a myth.
I've heard all the different rumors, but what do you think is hidden in the so-called secret archive?
There's basically two camps of secrets. There's the conventional ones, which are interesting. You know, sort of the letter from Henry VIII requesting an annulment for his marriage, the letters about Galileo and his heresy. But there's also going to be relics, you would think. You know, that could be the treasure of Solomon, the menorah. But how about the Ark of the Covenant? How about the Holy Grail? You know, would you want that stuff exposed? Maybe, maybe not. They probably have their reasons.
It is more than possible that there are so-called relics within the Vatican. I mean, most big Catholic churches throughout Christendom have always had relics, so why wouldn't the Vatican have them? Perhaps mummified bodies even of great church fathers. It is rumoured that they have the mysterious veil of Veronica hidden in one of the great pillars under the Vatican.
So you're telling me that the archive is not a reference library to illuminate. You think it's a depository for hidden items. Is that what you're saying?
You could argue if there's anything that's deflammatory that would be not in their best interest if it was brought to light, then why wouldn't you destroy it? But if it's private, if it's secret, there's probably an even stronger case for keeping it, but keeping it really locked up. And we're talking, you know, real biggies. Like, look around here. Every church, every basilica in this city, beneath it, you have pagan temples. And not just pagan temples, but temples of Mithraism. And what do we know about Mithra? Born on December 25th, died, was resurrected 3 days later. He was called the Savior. He performed miracles during his lifetime. He had 12 apostles. Does that sound familiar? But that was way before Christ. So they're kind of suppressing that because it was a bit dark. You know, they'd slaughter bulls. There was a sexual element to it. So Christianity kind of cleaned it up and polished the myth and told us it was true. And I think that is a biggie, that they've lied about the story because it's allegorical, it's not real.
One of the most surprising things about Rome is that the city we see today, including parts of the Vatican, lie right on top of the more ancient pagan city from well over 2,000 years ago. And some say that the old worship sites still play a secret but important role at the very highest levels of the church today.
Perhaps the very earliest people wanted to show the pagans, look, we're in charge now. We're building on top of the ruins of your religion. Okay, so that's as far as most traditionalists would go. But maybe there's also an element of we are absorbing the power. It's believed by many people, for example, that churches were built on power lines or ley lines, and that these in themselves had power in the land.
This was the craft of the wise. We believed in Mother Earth and that we go back to Mother Earth. And it's not really a bad thing at all. And they nicked all of the ideas, all of the pagan sites and Christianized it and splashed holy water on it and nicked all of the religious relics and things that were inside. And I would imagine they're probably still tucked away somewhere underneath the Vatican.
The church is not a holy, benevolent organization. It's actually satanic. And there's black masses and rituals, and they situated their city and the country above pagan temples below. And in fact, they're still venerated. Isis becomes Mary Magdalene. You have Osiris becoming Jesus, and so on. So the fact is, it's a really, really dark place.
This is San Clemente Church in Rome. It's run today by an Irish order of Dominican monks. It was founded over 3.5 centuries ago and houses one of the last remaining entrances down into the ancient pre-Christian remains of the city.
Vatican historian and local guide Rob Allen is an expert on subterranean Rome and agreed to show me the remains of a 2,000-year-old temple, which in its day was actually at ground level.
The amazing thing is that we're walking down to the 1st century AD now, and we're walking in to a house of brick that 100 years later, after it was built, was made into what was known as a Mithraeum, okay, for the cult of the pagan god Mithras. And if you can look over here, you can see a plaque, because when they excavated here in the 19th century, they had a problem. It's showing you the water level, because this whole place started to flood. There was a natural spring under here. And if you're quiet enough, you can hear the pump still running. It's still pumping out water today. Now, we're gonna be going inside where they had the religious practices of the Mithraeum. Mithraeum was a pagan cult. It wasn't a state cult, it was a mystery cult. So that doesn't mean that people didn't know of its existence, but people didn't know of all these important rituals about how to get involved in this kind of secret society cult. A cult that was exclusively for men, for soldiers, for administrators. And here is the culmination of the life of Mithras, this god right here. You see the god Mithras in his Phrygian cap. All right, he is a representation of the sun, and he is slaying a bull, which it is considered that it is the moon. Okay, do you see that he would have been in frescoes? We see him painted white. Okay, so it is like a crescent moon. You can even see his tail. It's right at the moment that he's being killed. And he has these creatures that are accompanying him because this is all an allegory to a rebirth. So you have here, it's hard to decipher, but we have a dog, we have a serpent, and right where the knife is stabbing, the blood is pouring out, they're drinking of it. And also you have a scorpion stinging him in the testicles, because this is all, they're taking the life force out of the bull. Sometimes it's even depicted that there are corn husks coming from his tail.
You know, for decades, hundreds of years, there's been rumors from priests, from cardinals, from reputable people, that there's a small sort of sect within the church who conduct sacrifices and rituals that are very, very dark indeed. So you have to wonder then, is it any accident that they've situated their capital and their country right on top of these temples? I think not.
The Vatican, like so many other Christian sites, was built on an existing place of worship. It's the form of the church saying, we're in control of religion now, so your pagan site now becomes a Christian site. So this is what happens in Rome, in the Vatican. Yes, there are remnants of old religions there that were probably a little bit darker than what Christianity is supposed to be. But the idea of extrapolating from an architectural accident or an architectural sort of, conjunction to saying that the leaders of the Catholic Church within the Vatican are a bunch of satanic occultists is nonsense of the highest order.
The Catholic Church, or should I say Christianity in general, hijacked paganism. That was, before them, the true religion, if you like, and they just nicked all of the sites, all of the ideals, the ideology behind it, and took it on for themselves.
There's a reason why you have very important religious sites, Christian sites being built on top of Mithraic pagan sites. And that's because, these sites had some sort of power and they wanted to be co-opted by this new religion. And if you look at most monotheistic societies, they more or less say all the same things, kind of like a smorgasbord of what's gone on before, which is why you see, whether it's paganism or Christianity, these kind of same things being enacted over and over again, to the point that even some of the names are similar.
Author Rob Howells has been studying and researching the Vatican and its secrets for over 2 decades. He believes that it does protect very important objects, documents, and other secrets.
So, Rob, what is the Vatican keeping secret?
For the entire time that they've existed, they've collected manuscripts and relics and items from either campaigns or crusades, not only for their own research and to support their ideas, but also to prevent anything coming out. Because they need to control the information around biblical issues and the biblical dogma, they can't allow alternative views to become public, become disseminated.
What kind of things exactly are you talking about?
In terms of documentation, they've got 52 miles of shelving of books and manuscripts alone. So that will be everything from early first-century fragments to potentially entire alternative gospels.
And why would that be damaging to the Catholic Church?
Because there's a potential for alternative views to emerge. There were lots of different books originally that were set to go in the Bible, and it was only through a process of politics, mainly, that the final books were chosen. There are also ideas that there's a book of Q that academics have termed a a book that would have been the source material for the main Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, because the main Gospels are written long after the time of Christ. So if they've got something like a book of Q, that would undermine everything else.
It has secret archives, and people say, oh, well, the word secret here just means private. Well, technically it does, but let's be honest, it means secret with knobs on. They are not letting the average person look at them. You can't photocopy anything. I've heard it on very good authority that there's said to be the Vatican within the Vatican, which is they have enormous pillars. Enormous pillars. You can get, almost like ballroom-sized pillars. And in there are the secret of the secrets, said to be the Veil of Veronica and all sorts of relics.
The heretical pieces of art, music, documents, that's the boring stuff. The real biggies, the real secrets, those are relics, devices, things that would cause history to be rewritten. Like what? Well, the fact that the church is based upon pagan origins, not holy foundations. That's the biggest secret.
Traditionally, archives are kept to illuminate, to show people different things, and in this case, it seems different.
Yeah, you'd expect an archive to be a public record that's made available, but because there's the potential for controversial material, you're not allowed access. You can get access to the secret archive in the Vatican only if you know exactly what you're looking for. No one's allowed to browse. And there is this other issue that they have potentially tens of thousands of documents that are still uncatalogued because they don't have an army of researchers in there. They've got a few librarians. So there could be documents they've got no idea of the importance of that they've got stored.
And is it just documents, or are there relics and other objects?
There's definitely relics. We know that from the Holy Land, certain items were returned, some quite extreme items. The foreskin of Christ is one of them that's said to be in the Vatican. Even the umbilical cord was supposed to have been kept. Whether they're real or not is very questionable. But many, many items were recovered, supposedly, and returned to the Vatican at various points in history.
People always talk about conspiracy theories and how these are really far-fetched, but actually, if you look at the Arch of Titus in Rome, it does depict, people sort of pillaging places like Jerusalem, bringing back relics. So, what's to say, in effect, that those relics aren't some of the things that these conspiracy theorists are saying that are under there, whether they're chalices or shrouds or whatever they are.
Now, of course, because there's this huge distrust about what so many former popes and senior figures in the Vatican have got up to, therefore, a lot of people think there must be all sorts of sort of evil stuff lurking in there, or indeed fantastic stuff like the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, this is just clearly nonsense. If the Vatican had the Ark of the Covenant kicking around, oh, look, what's that? Of course they'd display it. So I think there's some fanciful theories about what's in this archive. And I think they are largely bunk.
Very few people today are aware of the Vatican's dark history. The most controversial pope of modern times was Pius XII, who took over in 1939 and was labelled Hitler's Pope by those who accuse him of turning a blind eye to reports of the Holocaust. Further back, there was Pope Leo XIII, who, in the closing years of the 19th century, dashed fledgling hopes of reconciliation between the Church of England and the Church of Rome by declaring that all Anglican ordinations were null and void, a judgment which still stands. In the 9th century, Pope Stephen VI decided to exhume the corpse of his predecessor but one, Formosus, so that it could, wait for it, stand trial. Dressed in the papal vestments, it unsurprisingly offered no adequate defence and was condemned to be mutilated and thrown into the Tiber.
And in what was a low point for the sexual morals of the papacy, in 954, the 18-year-old John XII, the son of a previous pope, took office and turned the Lateran, the papal palace before the Vatican, into a brothel. He was ultimately murdered a decade later by an outraged cuckold who found him in bed with his wife.
In fact, over 1,000 years later, rumours and accusations still swirl around this holy city. In 2003, the so-called Magdalene laundries came to light, where it was proved that single mothers and prostitutes were forced into slave labour houses in Ireland, overseen by Catholic nuns. A $43 million settlement was paid to survivors. In 2009, it was revealed that the Archdiocese of Boston had covered up the sexual abuse of thousands of children by 70 priests. That figure has now increased to over 3,000 Catholic priests around the world accused of allegedly conducting systemic abuse of tens of thousands of children.
The Catholic Church is facing scandals and being forced to pay millions of dollars.
John Gagan is accused of molesting and raping boys as young as 4 years old over a period of 34 years.
2/3 of bishops, protected priests, accused of sexual abuse.
Lawyers for victims of the Catholic Church may sue the Vatican for access to material they say may shed light on the dialogue between Rome and American bishops to see if there was any official hush policy.
Do you think that the Catholic Church has known for some time about the problems that they have with child abuse and have been reluctant to go?
Oh, absolutely. They've been covering it up for years. There were cases of priests being caught and being found guilty internally within the by their peers and being moved to other locations before a scandal could break. So there has been a history of cover-ups, and the cover-ups has just done more damage because as soon as they're discovered, it's no longer an issue of one priest acting on his own. It's the whole organisation gets called into question for being that corrupt.
This is an evil empire. Whenever they come across, are made to face up to yet another example of child abuse. First of all, they always deny it. Second of all, when forced to accept it, they say, oh, well, it's just, the odd rotten apple in a barrel. There's an awful lot of rotten apples. There is obviously a network.
There's no doubt that throughout its history, there have been a lot of bad apples in the Vatican. There's no doubt that there are Catholic priests at all levels of the Vatican have done bad things. We've seen it in Ireland, so many child abuse cases carried out by Catholic priests, but I don't see the Vatican as being in itself this kind of center of evil that, is responsible for bad things happening in society throughout the ages. I see it as being as venal and corrupt as any other flabby, overly large institution that's not really held accountable.
One of the more bizarre services offered by the Vatican is the removal of devils and demonic spirits, or exorcism as it's more commonly known. For centuries now, Vatican-trained priests have gone out to combat evil and rid its followers of evil forces, armed only with a crucifix, a Bible, and some holy water. And yes, it is still going on today.
In fact, the Vatican's head exorcist for the last 30 years, Father Gabriele Amorth, recently died. He claimed to have overseen over 180,000 exorcisms in his life. He famously hated the Harry Potter novels and even yoga, saying, "Practicing yoga is satanic. It leads to evil, just like reading Harry Potter."
It is interesting that the Vatican does wholly believe in demons as an entity, and they've got more exorcists now than ever. Pretty much every diocese has an assigned exorcist within their region that they can call upon. They perform the rite of exorcism, which is a huge kind of document full of litanies and Latin and invoking the saints and basically trying to expel the demon.
There are now over 200 of them employed by the Vatican. Their job is to cast out demons that possess their flock, that take them over body and soul. And this, of course, goes back to the New Testament and earlier, where you read about Jesus casting out demons. And, of course, this is very much in that tradition.
It seems extraordinary that even today, relatively well into the 21st century, that the Vatican is still has some of its priests performing exorcisms. It shows that there is still this huge belief in what we'd associate with being some very ancient ideas of evil spirits and demons. These are kind of biblical concepts, from the Old Testament.
Padre Fortea from Madrid in Spain is one of the Catholic Church's most prolific exorcists. He says it's all very real.
After my long life studying all the phenomena related to demons, I may say with all security that I believe there are evil spirits, and those evil spirits match perfectly with the characters that appear in the Bible as demons. I can say by my own experience that I receive people every day. From Monday to Sunday, every day I receive people coming from all around Spain. Every year, 2 new cases of perfect demonical possession were discovered.
The church is predicated on the belief that there's good and evil, and you can't have one without the other. And if you believe that, then it's not surprising that you will believe in demons and evil spirits. The church is also predicated on the idea that nothing ever changes, right? So it is so strong in a way because nothing is ever questioned. Therefore, the exorcisms become part and parcel of this understanding.
The only thing that we need for an exorcism is faith. An exorcism can be done with a ritual or not. We may use holy water, a cross, everything. Sacramentals, blessed objects, are very useful. We see how the demons react to them because they represent something related to God. But the only thing that is needed is faith.
The interesting thing is the church does not deny that there are demonic energies. The fact that the rite of exorcism and the number of people trained in that is actually increasing year on year. And that's not an arbitrary sort of ritual. That's an 84-page Latin document that says this is how we do it. So the fact that they acknowledge evil just makes this sort of rumblings about the fact that they are evil much more interesting.
The Exorcist is one of the few ones that we have the opportunity to hear demons speaking through a human person. They speak most of the times with a very ugly voice, sometimes with a lot of intelligence or a great knowledge of theology. We know sometimes there is a demon there because few times we had the proof that that person could not know a little part of the Bible or the theology. Several times I was surprised. They knew perfectly well something. It was almost impossible.
There's no such things as demons. Basically, the church invented the devil because there was good, they had to invent evil. Because there was pluses, they had to invent minuses, and demons became little devils and possessed people. And anyone that was hearing voices in their heads, perhaps a little bit mediumistic or sensitive, oh no, it was a demon whispering in their ears, and it needed exorcists to get rid of them. Be gone, evil demon.
Rumours of banking scandals have swirled around the Vatican for years. Today, the Holy See saw 3 arrests.
5 priests have been indicted over an embezzlement case in the northwestern city of Sabona.
Vatican departments had almost free hand with the finances.
The church's money scandals stretch back decades.
Financial scandals have swirled around the Vatican ever since the death of Roberto Calvi back in 1982. Calvi was the head of the Vatican Bank, and he was found hanged under Blackfriars Bridge.
John Dickey is an investigative author who has looked long and hard into the secret world of Vatican finances. His books have included Cosa Nostra, Blood Brotherhoods, and Darkest Italy. According to Dickey, vast sums of money have been stolen and misappropriated by the church in recent years.
The church has got a long history of cohabiting with the mafia. The aspect that most people know about or suspect relates to the sort of God's bankers story from the 1980s that ended up with one banker working for the Vatican, Roberto Calvi, being strung up underneath Blackfriars Bridge in London. We still don't know exactly why, although one likely reason is that he was laundering mafia drug money through various banks, including the Vatican Bank. The finances of the Catholic Church are an absolute labyrinth, because you're not just talking about one pot of cash under the control of the Pope. You've got parishes, dioceses, you've got the Holy See, which is like the Pope's mission to the world. You've got the Vatican City, which is a mini country. And you've got the churches of all of the different countries. And then you've got all of the different religious orders. Now, over the centuries, all of these bodies have accumulated donations and buildings and churches, and nobody's kept tabs on this stuff. Nobody knows how much money the church has got, least of all the church.
For centuries, you would have one pope who would spend everything, empty the coffers, and the next pope that would come in and tax and rebuild and put all the money back in, and the next pope would come in and start building lavish works and buildings, and that still appears to go on. And the current pope is very humble and is very against spending and lives in with a sense of humility. The problem the Vatican's got itself into, which is one of the reasons I think they chose the current pope, is it has become completely incongruent with Christian values, basic Christian values of humility and love and poverty, and the way Jesus acted and behaved. He never kept any money, he gave everything to the poor. And then you look at the Vatican and the billions of pounds worth of works of art, of statues, of documents, of all this wealth and lavishness. So what are we to make of that?
Pope Francis is undoubtedly, he came in on a brief to introduce financial transparency. And he's certainly done that at the central level, particularly at the level of the Vatican Bank, the IOR, which for a long time was like an offshore bank. You know, there were political bribes being laundered through the Vatican Bank in the 1990s, mafia money, mafia drug money as well. Scandalous. And a lot's been done to make the Vatican Bank much more transparent. But Pope Francis has got a big, big job ahead of him. It would probably take 10 reforming popes and not just one to really get to the bottom of all of the meandering underground rivers of money within the church in the broad sense.
every new pope, including the current one, claims that they are going to reform the church. Yeah, right. This is the wealthiest institution that's ever been. They answer to no one. There's no transparency about their actions. So I like the fact that he's trying, but good luck to him.
So today, the Vatican is still facing serious allegations on a number of fronts, as it has for much of its 1,000-year existence. In each case, the Vatican has been forced time after time to apologize and pay huge fines in compensation, yet continues to court new controversy. However, what is still unclear is what was not discovered or not revealed in the various archive openings. Many continue to believe that the heavily guarded vaults under the Vatican contain heretical material, including alternative Christian gospels, captured texts from other competing religions, and even core relics, such as the Ark of the Covenant and the human remains of Jesus himself.
The irony, of course, about the Vatican, and indeed the whole Roman Catholic Church, is this is an institution responsible for one of the most tyrannical and bloodthirsty episodes in history, which, of course, was the Inquisition. And while the Vatican and the Catholic Church has been very good at, forming inquiries and inquisitions against people outside, it's been very bad at inquiring at itself. It's never, had an inquisition, an internal inquisition, with quite the same rigor and indeed bloodthirstiness as it may have needed. And I think that what we're looking at today is that it is slowly entering into the 21st century in which it's being held to account more. I think people are more cynical, they are less trusting, and even people who are devout Catholics look at the Vatican and go, is this representing what I want in an institution that is there to promulgate and further my faith? And these are reasonable questions to ask.
There's a lot about the Vatican that's really, when you look at it, quite archaic. If you think about it, this feeds into one of the core notions of religion in general. You do not change. You got it right, when the Messiah came and said, this is how it was, and you don't question and you don't change, because if you change one thing, then everything begins to be questioned. And I guess this is very much what they live by.
The whole Jesus story is made up. And everything from the 10 Commandments, the 7 deadly sins, 4 mortal sins, purgatory, hellfire, damnation, Beelzebub, Baphomet, Baal, the devil, demons, the Antichrist, and witches are all made up to keep us under control through fear.
It's been mired in scandal after scandal for the last 30 years or so. Money laundering, theft, bullying, child abuse. No matter how much is thrown at the Vatican, it seems to shrug it off and remain as strong as ever. Its critics have written it off for decades, predicting its collapse, and yet in some parts of the world, the Catholic Church is actually growing. The new Pope, Francis, is said to be cleaning up, but whether he will succeed, well, that's too early to say. One thing's for certain, the next chapter in the Vatican's history is going to be an interesting one. I'll see you next time. Mary Magdalene is one of the most controversial figures in the Bible. But who was she really? Is it true, as some claim, that she had a relationship with Jesus, maybe even married him and bore him children? Some people even say that she was the real Messiah, a living, breathing healer and mystic, and that Jesus was simply her partner. And what happened to her? Did she die in the Holy Land, or as some think, did she come to France and start a ministry here.
Most Christians say that she was a prostitute who met Jesus and reformed, but there is evidence in the Gnostic Gospels that not only were they very close, but also that she had power over him in some way, that he was besotted with her.
The real Mary Magdalene was much more interesting, much more involved than the biblical Mary Magdalene that we know.
Mary Magdalene had special powers, mystic, healing, and so she was much revered because of it. A priestess, a goddess. She was something special.
The real Jesus Christ was a woman. It was Mary who was airbrushed. Mary who is the real spiritual leader of the first century Judea.
It's a version of events that you won't read about in the Bible, but it's claimed by some that a deal was done with the Roman governor in Jerusalem at the time, Pontius Pilate, to secretly get the body of Jesus out of the city at the time of the crucifixion, possibly dead, possibly alive, maybe even sedated. And this explains why it's claimed no body was found in his tomb. But is it true?
Just from reading the Bible, there's enough evidence to say that it's unlikely that Jesus died on the cross. He didn't have his legs broken. He wasn't on the cross long enough to die. It's a long, slow, painful death, crucifixion. But they took him down. But then shortly after, Jesus is walking around again. And clearly, if he is the king of the Jews, he's a major threat to Roman rule because he could spark an uprising. So he has to disappear. And then Mary leaves supposedly the Holy Land, according to the Book of the Saints, and goes to France. The question is, did she take Jesus with her? Or did she take the body? What happened?
When Jesus was crucified by the Romans, Mary Magdalene was there supporting him in his final terrifying moments and mourning his death. She also discovers the empty tomb, and she's a witness to the resurrection. In art, she's often semi-naked, or an isolated hermit repenting for her sins in the wilderness, an outcast. But we know her best as a prostitute. Powerful as this image may be, for many scholars and historians, it's not the story of the real Mary Magdalene. She is mentioned in each of the 4 Gospels in the New Testament, but not once does it mention that she was a prostitute or a sinner.
The biblical Mary Magdalene is seen as quite of a passive figure, as a woman to be saved. So if you kind of think of any fairy tale, she's sort of the beautiful princess that's there to be saved, and she's a sinner and she repents, and she kind of comes up at very sort of seminal moments in Jesus's life. But there's some historians that believe that the real Mary Magdalene was much more involved in the way that Jesus developed his ideas, in supporting him. In fact, as perhaps being that 13th apostle that people often speak of.
She's possibly a woman that lived near the Sea of Galilee in a small fishing village. She's possibly from Ethiopia in Magdala there. She's possibly from Egypt. So it's very difficult to sort of pick one story and say, this is our real Mary Magdalene.
It appears that at some point, Mary Magdalene became confused with 2 other women in the Bible, Mary, the sister of Martha, and the unnamed sinner from Luke's Gospel, both of whom washed Jesus' feet with their hair. In the 6th century, Pope Gregory the Great made this incorrect assumption official by declaring in a sermon that these 3 characters were actually the same person, Mary Magdalene.
After the inception of Christianity, when Christianity started to build and grow, one of the things that began to happen was the role of Mary Magdalene began to be hidden. So by the time you get to the 6th century, she's conflated with the figure who's the woman taken in adultery in the Bible. So at that point, she starts to become this this lost woman, this penitent woman who was seen as a prostitute, who's seen as a negative.
The real Mary Magdalene was changed by a Christian church when the Bible was written, and written again, and changed and written again. She was changed from a mystic, a wise woman, a noble woman, into nothing more than a hooker, a sinner, as all women were at the time. It was a male-dominated religion, and women had to be debased.
Well, the church decided, early on that it was going to be an all-male affair, so they couldn't have, the Magdalene being the role model for women. They wanted to keep women down, and that, boy, have they succeeded. And a large part of it was what they did to the Magdalene's image, turning her into this model of female shame. Because for generations, for centuries, fallen women were known as Magdalenes. I mean, that's horrible. And that's the ultimate spin, really.
Lynn Picknett has written 2 best-selling books on Mary Magdalene and has been researching the truth about her for over 30 years.
So who was Mary Magdalene?
Well, the church's story about her is based on the Gospels in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. And she's hardly in there by name. There's lots of other allusions to her, which you can work out in the context that it refers to her. But basically, she doesn't star very much until the crucifixion, when she turns up at the foot of the cross and then goes to the tomb, and she discovers that Jesus' body has disappeared. And then allegedly meets him in the garden, the resurrected Jesus in the garden. So that's her big moment, at Jesus' death. She comes in, and quite clearly, she's so important, she must be important, but there's not much that in the actual canonical biblical Gospels that lead you to believe how important she is until the very end of the story.
There is something greater coming to all of you, I know. I have seen a vision, so beautiful that I cannot put it into words.
Who's responsible for how she was portrayed in the Bible?
It is entirely the work of the Catholic Church. There's no evidence, biblical evidence, or evidence anywhere else that she was a prostitute. But in the 8th century AD, a pope said, wait a minute, she's described as a sinner. She was a woman, she must have been a prostitute. And that became that. The other thing is that women started off with Jesus, the immediate mission, started off in positions of power. Women who preached and baptized, healed, and even administered the sacrament. And when the Vatican, the early Vatican, sent people to ask what was going on, they said, but don't you know, this is how Jesus instigated things through Mary Magdalene. So the early church knew about this. They knew that Jesus had empowered women and that Mary Magdalene was, in fact, as described in the Gnostic Gospels, apostle of the apostles, not St. Peter. She was in charge.
Those who seek him shall find him.
Women have historically been brushed out of history. And you're talking about a story that's 2,000 years old. Any woman relaying a message of that magnitude and importance, they wouldn't want that to be. They'd want it to be Jesus' message. And I think, interestingly enough, when, in the readings of Jesus, to me, he sounds like a real hippie, like a kind of guy that's very sort of egalitarian and fair. And one wonders if he probably wanted a female voice, if he probably valued this voice in a way that many of the people that went on to write the Bible and preach the Bible perhaps didn't.
Open your hearts, open your minds, and open your souls.
We can't forget that everything we know about Jesus and Mary Magdalene was written decades after they lived. So imagine a group of men in the First Council of Nicaea saying, right, boys, what's the story gonna be? I believe they created the story of Jesus Christ to cover up the fact that it was a woman, not a man, who is a leader of the spiritual movement in the early 1st century.
Perhaps the most incredible claim about Mary Magdalene was that when she fled the Holy Land to go to France, she was actually pregnant with Jesus' child.
Mary reaches France, and she all of a sudden becomes the centre of certainly a certain form of Christianity. She arrives there, spends 30 years in a cave as a hermit, but healing people, performing miracles. And of course, the big one is that the legend has it that she actually arrived in France with a child.
Some people believe that Mary Magdalene may have even been Jesus' wife and that they may have gone on to have a family together. I'm not sure what evidence exists about this, but one of the things I think that we can be sure of is in those times, women were written out of history. So her role in Jesus' life is likely to have been minimized. Now, the extent to which, you know, her role was bigger in terms of their relationship or her effect on his ideas and therefore Christianity is underplayed. I think it's probably safe to say that just given the fact that she's a woman, probably was.
This small French town of Saint-Marie-de-la-Mer, or St. Mary's of the Sea, near Marseille, in the south of France, is where, it's claimed, Mary Magdalene and her party landed in a boat around 45 AD. Now, according to the tradition, they'd sailed from Alexandria in Egypt, and the party included Joseph of Arimathea, Jesus' uncle, and maybe even the body of Jesus himself. The church here celebrates this story, but to slightly confuse things, it venerates not one, but 3 Marys who were said to have come ashore that day.
Eat. This is a celebratory meal for all of you. The journeys that you've been on, and the journey that continues. I'm so proud of all of you. Enjoy, drink.
The original Church of St. Mary's was built sometime in the 9th century, and local guide and Magdalene expert Martine Guillot agreed to show me around.
Martine, what did Mary Magdalene do when she was here?
Not only Mary Magdalene, but all the persons who arrived here have a mission. The mission of tell that Jesus is alive, the message of the resurrection. So the Holy Marys stay here. They were a bit old, about 60, and the others, and Mary Magdalene, were younger. She was about 30, 35. So they can go to speak about Jesus and the Gospels.
So Mary Magdalene was preaching.
Yes, I think
here?
so, because I think they came here for that.
In the Bible, you never really hear about Mary that much until the crucifixion, the burial, and the resurrection. And then she's gone. But then she reappears in a whole wealth of traditions in the south of France, where she supposedly went, which makes perfect sense. You've just been exiled from the biggest Jewish community on the planet. Where are you gonna go? The next biggest Jewish community on the planet, French Gaul.
She didn't just go over and sort of lay low, as it were. She went over and carried on his mission. So if she was involved in Jesus' life in some capacity, she was certainly intellectually and ideologically on a par with him, believed in what he believed in, and you know, didn't take a back seat, was there as a missionary to kind of spread the word.
She was a rich woman who had gone on a mission. She came to the south of France, she preached, she healed, she probably even baptized. There are streams all over the Languedoc area of France called the Source Magdalene Stream, based on those old legends that she baptized there. So she was a very important, probably the first apostle.
Right at the very top of the Church of St. Mary's is a small private chapel that contains relics of the 3 Marys. Martine has given me special access to have a look around.
This is extraordinary. So what is this? Is like a private chapel?
It's a high chapel. We call this the high chapel. It's inside the bell tower. First, it was dedicated to Saint Michel, Archange, like all the high chapel in France. And after arrived the relics of the Holy Marys.
So this is the church we were just in.
Yes.
And what is this? What is in this box?
You have the relics of Mary Jacobé. In this box, Mary Jacobé. Other box, Mary Salome. There are two boxes together, like that.
What's through here?
Oh, it's a reliquary. Also, relics of Mary Salome and Mary Jacobé. There are 11 pieces of bones, dark, because they burned during the revolution, the French Revolution.
So these are fragments of Mary's bones?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
As confusing as all the Marys are in this story, what kind of clarifies it for us is only one of them is called the Magdalene, which means tower in Hebrew, but in Aramaic, it means fantastic, exalted, excellent. And that feels about right.
What's really telling is that there's this story put about that Mary Magdalene ends up in the south of France, effectively being the figure that we suppose Jesus to have been. It's she who's going around being this kind of almost sort of hippie-esque figure, preaching the good word, and promoting this idea of compassionate Christianity. It's a nice idea.
And why are there no bones of Mary Magdalene?
We have no bones of Mary Magdalene here because she didn't stay here. When all the group arrived, only the two Marys, Mary Jacobé and Mary Salome, stay here. And Mary Magdalene go away.
Where did she go? Do we know?
Sure, in the Sainte-Baume. So you find the relics of Mary Magdalene in Sainte-Baume and Saint-Maximin.
Every May, this small town celebrates the Three Marys coming ashore with a huge gypsy festival. A wooden box containing sacred relics of the Marys is carefully lowered from the church tower in a special ceremony. This is followed by the procession of a sacred boat that is taken to the sea and blessed by the bishop in front of thousands of onlookers, all of whom venerating the arrival of the Three Marys.
So this boat gets taken down to the sea?
Yes, in the sea, over the sea, of course, but in the sea. And when the boat is in the sea, the archbishop blessed the sea with the holy arm, with the reliquary, because the sea bring us the gospel.
Even the Catholic Church accepts that Mary came to France, so relics are in Vézelay Cathedral. So it's believed within the Catholic Church, the Orthodox story of Mary is that she did come to France. There are local stories and ideas that she had a following, but also in the alternative Gospels, we read that she was party to the inner secrets of Jesus' teaching. The other apostles ask her to tell them what Jesus has told her because she knows more than they do.
In the south of France, they still keep a candle burning for Mary Magdalene, and actually, they say that she was actually integral to Christianity and Jesus' mission, and she was somebody who was a healer in her own right and a strong woman in her own right. So you have, even though it's a Catholic country, at least a part of it that says, well, no, we're not going to kind of buy into this biblical view of this woman. We think she had a much stronger position than what's portrayed.
In 1279, excavations of the crypt beneath a small church in Saint-Maximin in France uncovered first-century tombs along with a surprising find: a sarcophagus made of marble. Charles II, the Count of Provence who led the excavation, claims he was spurred to do so by a dream in which St. Mary Magdalene appeared to him. When the sarcophagus was opened, a wonderful and very sweet smell was noted by all present to emanate from inside, which they believed to be symbolic of the perfume Mary Magdalene poured on the feet of Jesus before his death. Pilgrims and tourists flock to see the Magdalene relics today, and local priest, Father Florian Racine, agreed to show me around.
Jimmy, let's go to the crypt of Mary Magdalene, and it's here that you have what's left of her bones, the skull. It's from the 4th century.
Okay.
And you have a nice old grid here.
So this is the origin of the church, right here.
It's the origin of the church, yes. So Jimmy, we are here in the crypt, and you can see some sarcophagus, and that's the one of Saint Mary Magdalene. So it was made out of a marble, beautiful marble that is translucid. If you put a light inside, you will see the light coming out. You have different parts of the life of Jesus and Mary Magdalene on this sarcophagus, and it's very damaged because many pilgrims, when they came, they wanted to take a little piece of marble to keep, to take back home. Right. That's why it's so damaged, actually.
So this is where Mary Magdalene was buried, here in this?
Mary Magdalene was buried here.
And so her bones were inside here, and then this is her.
So that's, you can see the skull of Mary Magdalene that is here.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It's quite macabre seeing her skull.
In St. Maximum in Provence, they claim to have the skull of Mary, and it looks completely authentic, and it's part of their rituals, their ceremonies, even today. And this sort of makes sense. For someone that important, you would know where they were when they died. So where is the skull of Jesus? Don't tell me he went to heaven. So it just leads you to believe that this is the real deal. This skull could very well have been the skull of the woman who lived and preached and taught in this area.
He who has ears to hear, let them hear. He who has a mind to understand, let them understand.
For Christians, it's important also to go back to the tradition and to know that Mary Magdalene really existed. It's not a legend. So for many pilgrims, they are so happy to come here and to pray Mary Magdalene.
How do we know that this is actually Mary Magdalene's skull?
Basically, she was buried here and then put in this sarcophagus in the 4th century. And then there was a time where the Saracens came here in the 7th, 8th century. So they had to bury everything. All the sarcophagus were put within the ground. And then the memory of Mary Magdalene was just a kind of oral tradition. We knew she was somewhere here, but there was nothing. Everything was destroyed. And it's in 1279 that Charles II of Anjou, he made some research and he found those sarcophagus that was probably deeper within the ground. And then he took the skull of Mary Magdalene and he went to the Vatican to see the Pope, Bonifacius VIII at that time. And what's interesting for us, it's that they had the jaw, right. And so they just took the skull that was from here, the jaw, and they could see that it fit perfectly. And so from that time, the Pope, Bonifacius VIII, said, the remains, the relics of Mary Magdalene are here in St. Maximin.
Interestingly, when the skull of Mary Magdalene was first discovered, there was still a piece of her skin attached to it that is said to have been touched by Jesus himself.
When Mary Magdalene saw Jesus at the resurrection, she wanted to hold Jesus. So she fell at the feet of Jesus, and Jesus said, do not touch me. Like, Jesus did that to Mary Magdalene. Right. And so the risen Lord touched this piece of skin of Mary Magdalene, and it's a sign. So we call it the noli me tangere. It was there on the skin, and then it was removed during the French Revolution, and it was put in this little bulb there. You can see that.
So that is the Mary Magdalene's skin that was touched by Jesus?
Exactly, by the risen Lord. So that's a sign of the resurrection, I would say.
So my quest, I guess, has been to find the real Mary Magdalene, and here she is.
Here she is. You're right, you found her.
She's very important to the Catholic Church in this area. And I think the feeling is that somehow or another, the true Mary Magdalene had been known about. Because if she was in the neighbourhood, they would know, you know, all those years ago, they would have known what she was like. And that sits rather uncomfortably with what the Church has done to her.
Well, it's confusing for me because the Church seems quite happy to celebrate her here. Yes. There's no issue about...
No, but they're only celebrating their own version of her. They're not celebrating the partner of Jesus who was his spiritual equal. They're celebrating a reformed prostitute who's a penitent.
And this story took another bizarre twist just over 100 years ago. In a Cairo bazaar in 1896, a German scholar happened to come across a curious papyrus book. Bound in leather and written in Coptic, he discovered the Gospel of Mary.
If you look at the Gospels that were rejected from the New Testament by vote in the 4th and 5th century AD, the Gnostic Gospels, such as the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, indeed. She's the star. I mean, obviously, Jesus is the star, but apart from him, she's the star. And a very, very different picture emerges. She is, well, first of all, extremely feisty, won't shut up, does not behave like a woman of Jewish woman of that time and place at all. She doesn't. For example, she wears her hair loose, which, you know, and kind of flaunts it, which only really women of bad reputation did. But she didn't care. And her relationship with Jesus is astonishing. There is evidence in the Gnostic Gospels that not only were they very close, but they were in some kind of physical relationship, but also that she had power over him in some way, that he was besotted with her.
Well, if you read the wider Gospels beyond the Bible, there is a Gospel of Mary and there is a Gospel of Philip, which speaks about her being the most important of the apostles, of her having what appears to be an intimate relationship with Jesus, and that he often kissed her, and that he loves her is stated very clearly. And one of the apostles says, "Why do you not love us as much as her?" at one point. Or why do you love her so much? And he says, "Why do I not love you as much as I love her?" So clearly, according to the apocryphal Gospels, she is really important. And she's seen as his companion. She's described as the companion of Jesus. So they appear to be on an equal footing.
Mary's relationship to Jesus is a very controversial one. Most biblical historians, biblical scholars come to it from a religious point of view. If you really want to strip away all the myth and legend to find the facts, you've got to dump the religion first. And then you look at it with a completely different mind. It's highly likely that Jesus would have been married to somebody. He's likely to have children. It would be strange if he didn't. So if we assume he's married, then you look and see, okay, well, this woman's constantly next to him. He's always spoken of as his favourite. In some of the other texts we have, he kisses her, he's walking around with her, he shares his life with her. You're pretty much saying he's married to her.
If you look at what Mary Magdalene did, I mean, she's in the possession of expensive ointments. She appears to be affluent. She's kissing Jesus on the lips. She is there at his alleged crucifixion, pregnant. She's the first to see him at his resurrection. That is somebody who is only in an elite position, such as a partner, such as a wife, such as a leader of a spiritual community would actually have.
Whether Mary Magdalene actually had an intimate relationship with Jesus, or even possibly a child together, one thing we do know for certain is that here in the south of France, Mary is regarded as a hugely important figure in the Bible. She and a small group are said to have come here to continue their teachings and preach the Gospels. There are many relics dedicated to Mary Magdalene held in the Catholic churches in the area. Father Florian Racine has agreed to show me another relic that was also discovered at the same time as Mary's skull.
So now we're going to the sacristy, the beautiful sacristy of the Basilica.
Right, okay.
I have the
Wow, that's a key.
You can see that?
Yes, that's quite a
Nice,
key.
That's a nice key, yeah.
You're not going to lose that one.
No. All right, so now, so it's supposed to be already here. All right. So this is the sacristy of the Basilica, and I want Jimmy to show you something that is very interesting. We have other relics here.
Oh, right, okay.
All right.
Oh, in the safe.
Yeah. So here you have the hair of Mary Magdalene.
Wow, can I hold that?
Yeah, please.
Wow, look at that.
So you can see hair of Mary Magdalene that were found, discovered with a skull of Mary Magdalene in 1279, little piece of bone. And we did some scientific studies not long ago, and they found some pigment of red color. So we knew that Mary Magdalene had, red hair.
And in a lot of the paintings I've seen of Mary, her hair is quite significant, isn't it?
Yeah, it is significant, and specifically because we find the hair in the Gospel when Mary Magdalene weeps on the foot of Jesus. No, yeah, and then she wipes the tears with the hair, and also she put the perfume on the foot of Jesus, and she wipes again the feet of Jesus with her hair. That's why these hair are significant and important.
I think the reason Mary is important is because she's closer to the source of Christianity. So if you're going to be a Christian, Mary would have been the route to go, because the other apostles accepted that she was closer to Jesus and was party to his inner teachings. So there would have been an inner teaching within Christianity that we don't see in the Bible that she may have brought to France.
Various people have suggested that Jesus could have been her frontman. Because after all, it was a male-dominated society, and it was maybe her message, but they wouldn't put up with her standing on her hind legs in Judea, so he did it. But I mean, he certainly, like that with her, spiritually as well. And there's evidence that she got him to change his doctrine publicly, and he didn't seem to mind at all, when she did it. And she was very much keeping an eye on what he was saying, she was very much behind it. And did her best after he was out of the picture to keep it going.
Father Racine had one more item he wanted to show me, a 14th century cape that was used in processions dedicated to Mary Magdalene.
And so now let's open that. It's very old, beautiful, fragile.
That's amazing.
Can you pull?
Yeah, sure, yeah. An extraordinary thing.
So here, everything is made with golden thread, and it's made with a special technique that is a British technique of the 13th and 14th century. And you have all the life of Jesus, the different parts of the life of Jesus. You can see the details, it's very beautiful. So it was used to make procession for Mary Magdalene.
It looks like a tapestry, but
it is, yeah, we can say. And
can we see Mary Magdalene here anywhere?
We can see Mary Magdalene with holding Jesus at the resurrection. It's here, sorry.
Yeah.
So you can see Jesus and Mary Magdalene here.
So this is all hand-stitched, and it is, what, 800 years old?
800 years old, and given to the son of Charles II of Anjou, who discovered the relic of Mary Magdalene. So it was made for him when he was consecrated as a bishop, and he could use that, you know, when they were doing all the procession for Mary Magdalene.
So the church then believes that Mary Magdalene was a real person. That's true, right?
Yes.
We know Mary Magdalene was real.
Yes.
That she was once a prostitute, but was reformed.
Yes, repentant, yes.
Repentant.
Yes, yes.
And it's her conversion from the prostitute to a disciple of Christ that is the important message of that.
Yes. Yes, really. Really. It's a really, really way of real life.
Mary Magdalene is said to have retired to a cave on a hill near Marseille called Saint Baume, where she gave herself up to a life of penance for 30 years. The cave is now a Christian pilgrimage site. Magdalene expert and author Lynn Picknett agreed to come along.
This is just the most amazing place.
It's almost like it's like a sort of church that's been cut into.
If you took the actual cave away, it is a church. I mean, it looks like any, you know, you get in a very high-quality church, but it's the whole atmosphere, because it is the grotto that she was supposed to have spent the last 3 decades of her life in. There's imbued with this extraordinary magical ambience.
So, according to the legend, Mary Magdalene she lived here for 30 years.
Yes, according to the legend.
And what was she doing? Was she hiding out, or?
Well, maybe she was hiding out because part of the traditional story is, you know, she was fleeing from the Holy Land because of persecution of the early Christians. So maybe she was partly hiding. But essentially, it was the ultimate spiritual retreat. She came here, and it is said that she spent all that time in meditation, prayer, and penitence for her sins, and obviously meditating upon Jesus and the crucifixion and so on, and her life as a disciple.
I do believe that Mary Magdalene had special powers, mystic, healing, mediumistic, supernatural, whatever supernatural means. It's just something that we didn't understand at the time. And so she was much revered because of it, a priestess, a goddess, whatever you want to call her.
What is religion if it's not about believing the unbelievable? So actually, when you look at Jesus and you look at Mary Magdalene is so much easier to believe. She's flawed like the rest of us. She's, you know, there's a transformative element like the rest of us. So one has to wonder if this woman, you know, that was kind of in the background the whole time, didn't play a much bigger role.
Now go preach. Go preach this gospel to your holy kingdom. Share with them your learnings.
And obviously this chapel here is obviously a later addition.
Yes, it was set up and is still maintained to this day by the Dominican order of monks. Right. Who are specially dedicated to her, and in this place, obviously, they maintain it beautifully and with enormous heart and soul. And it, you know, it just, pilgrims come here, you know, they still come here because of her.
What I don't understand is if she's travelled over here to spread the word of Jesus, why has she spent 30 years on her own in a cave?
It doesn't work, does it? It doesn't hang together at all. Although the idea seemed to be, in the traditional story, insofar as you can kind of piece it together, that the chronology was she converted the whole of Provence, and then she retired to the cave. And then presumably people made the tricky journey up to see her on a, you know, one-to-one basis or something to have a chat. But that's extrapolation from the few facts that we have, or the few bits of tradition that we have.
When you come here, it's amazing how many visitors and pilgrims are deeply moved by the whole Mary Magdalene story. not least because, I'm sure, she'd been maligned by the Bible for so long. It's astonishing to think that the church treated her as a prostitute until 1969. And yet nowadays, to see her as a healer, a minister, and a leading advocate of Christianity doesn't seem in the least bit strange.
In many ways, Mary Magdalene is one of the most divisive characters in the Bible. Historians are pretty sure that she did really exist, but was labelled a prostitute by the New Testament scribes in the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. Why did they do that is the burning question. A growing number of historians and scholars now believe that it was to entirely discredit someone who may have actually been his lover and wife, and even, very controversially, the real Messiah herself.
Do you think there'll be another chapter in this story? Do you think the truth will come out about Mary Magdalene?
If it's up to me, it will. I never stop trying to tell a story because it's got everything as stories go. And it's had enormous relevance to people like me who are very interested in religions and, you know, the effect that religions had on culture and it still continues to have. You know, if you're going to have veneration for Mary Magdalene, get her right.
I don't think the historically accurate story of Mary will ever come out unless a document is discovered. I think if it's owned by the Vatican and it's not in their interest to release it. But I do think that the reason people are so interested in Mary Magdalene is because she does fulfill a lost archetype in Christianity of the emancipated woman and of the intuitive, feminine, spiritual side that's missing from religion, from Christianity in particular. And I think she embodies that for people. And that's why she's incredibly important today. And I think that's why people are inspired by her and are interested in her.
I think in 100 years' time, we will look on females and Mary Magdalene in a very different light to how she's been treated for the last 2,000 years. And all of a sudden, females will become equal to males, as they are becoming now at long last. We're not there yet. And I think that Mary Magdalene may well be hailed as the new Messiah.
The irony is that only in the last few decades has the church come out and fessed up and said, you know, she wasn't a prostitute. We admit that. But the fact that they won't admit that she was the real deal makes her even more popular. She is a rock star today. She's a celebrity. She's a sacred icon of the feminist movement and the most revered woman in history. So take that, Catholic Church.
So, was Mary Magdalene the lover and wife of Jesus Christ? Did she bear him one or possibly even more children? Or was she the real Messiah and head of the new Christian church who was simply written out of the history books several hundred years after her death and condemned as a common prostitute? Could the church really have pulled off a lie like this? I'll let you make up your own mind. See you next time.